Hello and welcome to the boat race fixture series, the second week that Ludum is bringing you of the Gemini boat race. I'm Martin Cross, and with me Camilla Hadland, and we will be taking you through a marathon of fixtures. Some we're going to be following in our cameras from the launch, some we'll follow from a fixed camera on the bank, but we hope to bring you the best of the action of all of the fixtures going on this afternoon. So 2 weeks ago, we had our races from the Cambridge women and the Oxford women that we brought you. The Cambridge women beat Oxford Brookes over two pieces. They looked pretty dominant, but Brookes were pleased, I think, at the distance behind the Cambridge women that they were. And the Oxford women had to row through Leander, and they beat Leander in two pieces just a couple of weeks ago. I haven't seen too much of the Oxford men in terms of the fixture races. I think one of their fixtures against the University of Washington was sadly postponed, but the Cambridge men did race Leander at Henley and came out the better of that fixture. And we have some of the reverse fixtures this afternoon. So, Camilla, what are you looking forward to?
I think for me, it's Cambridge going up against Leander on the women's side because we're going to get a direct comparison from that race 2 weeks ago. And there's only one change in that Leander crew, which, a fairly set lineup. We know exactly the measure of them. So, yeah, seeing how different that result will be with Cambridge versus the Leander crew. And again, just one change in the Cambridge crew, a last minute announcement this morning. Obviously, we've got to remember that Jess Eddy was racing 2 weeks ago, but this is closer to the actual blue boat that will be announced tomorrow than ever before.
Yeah. I think I'm looking forward to seeing the Oxford men's the power of the Oxford men's crew, and they're racing Leander, which I guess Cambridge beat Leander. You would assume that the Oxford men are going to be too strong for Leander, but I guess that's yet to be seen. There might be a little bit of a direct comparison there to let us know how fast Oxford's are relative to Cambridge by that result. And I really looking forward to seeing the Cambridge men. I think I really like the way they row up against. Well, I say the might of Oxford Brookes. It's not really the might of Oxford Brookes because all their guys have hightailed it off to Caversham, I believe.
Yeah, a lot of the Brooks guys have been sort of training with the squad. A lot of their top guys that raced last year in the Grand Challenge Cup at HRR have done and performed well enough at trials to be part of that sort of Project Paris group that are aiming to go to the Olympics. And so we won't be seeing them race this weekend. A lot of this group actually were in the Temple 8 from last year's Henley Royal Regatta. So a fast crew, they recorded a really speedy time at the British University Championships, 5:30 in an 8. So they're not going to be messing around here, Crossy. We're just not going to see the sort of very top of the pile when it comes to the Brooks athletes that we're used to.
Yeah, so I think we're going to show you what what sort of fixtures we've got this afternoon. One race is already underway: Osiris versus Oxford Brookes B, and that left the start early, so we're not going to bring you that race. But the second of our fixtures is the Cambridge Women's Reserve Boat Blondie versus Leander's second crew, Leander B. And yeah, there you can see Cambridge Women Reserves are racing Leander. And then we've got in red the fixtures that we're covering with launches, cameras in launches following the race. Cambridge University Women racing Leander's A crew. And then we see the Oxford University women going up against Oxford Brookes that Cambridge took on a couple of weeks ago. ISIS, the Oxford University men's crew, racing Leander B. And then the Oxford University men, we hope we're going to bring you that race. We hope we've got a camera alongside at the moment, racing Leander A. Cambridge University men, Goldie, racing Oxford Brookes B. And then our final race is the Cambridge University Blue Boat, the men racing Oxford Brookes A crew. So all through the afternoon, we're going to be on air till I guess sometime after 4 o'clock, there's a lot of racing. A lot of things could happen in those races as well. I guess, a lot of things could go wrong, potentially on the Tideway. But it's a mighty recipe of racing that we've got today.
Yeah, we do. And you mentioned earlier how we'd had a fixture at Henley. I think it's going to be very different seeing the men's cruise race, Cambridge racing here on the Tideway. It's a completely different kettle of fish. So a full, probably one of the busiest days we've got in terms of fixtures. We'll hope to bring you as much action as we can. But I guess we should probably introduce the first race that we are going to be streaming live, which is going to be that race, CUBC versus the CUBC Women versus Leander. So that direct comparison race that I'm really looking forward to. Here are your crew lineups. Like we said, no change really, apart from got to note Sam Corty coming into this Leander crew at 2. In place of Natasha Harris-White, who we saw race a couple of weekends ago. Sam Corty, of course, was part of the British squad training up to and around Tokyo 2020, but unfortunately had to duck out because of a back operation, but back racing competitively now. Great to see her in this lineup and going up against a very strong looking Cambridge crew. We mentioned them when we caught them racing Brookes the other weekend, but Imogen Grant at stroke once again. We've got the crew announcement tomorrow, haven't we, Crossy? And I'm really intrigued, and it certainly looks like we might be getting Imogen Grant and Grace Prendergast as our stern pair for Cambridge Uni's Blue Boat. That would be pretty magnificent, right?
Yeah, it will. I mean, what a fantastic stern pair combination, basically. I just wonder, with Sarah Portsmouth out of the boat, because she was going to sit at 6, they've moved Kamina Dempsey from the 2 seat up to the 6 seat, Cambridge, and they've put Joe Matthews in at the 2 seat. I wonder how much that move will disrupt them.
Yeah, and it was Bronya Sykes that we were missing a couple of weeks ago that they put Jess Eddy in for. So that combination at 6 and 5 of Quiva Dempsey and Bronya Sykes, they're not going to have done much competitive racing side by side because it's that middle of the boat's just been changing due to injury, due to illness. So this will be a really interesting test for them to see if that rhythm can transfer from that pretty magical combination at stroke and 7 and through the boat. That's a really key piece for Cambridge to get right, I think, in this matchup against Leander. As we saw, it really worked for the Oxford women. It was a lot of their rhythm that caused their speed and for them to come back later on in the race on Leander. We know Leander have got a really fast start, so Cambridge need to see if they can replicate that.
Yeah, I just wonder what Leander will do, because on that first piece against Oxford, they literally blasted off, shot off, and they established that lead. The Oxford then hunted them down and rode them down. Be very interesting to see if the Cambridge women compete with Leander off the start in a more direct way. I think Leander were more conservative on the second piece against the Oxford women, but they still got rode through. I'm going to be very interested to see the speed of the Cambridge women off of the start.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be really intrigued to see whether we get a faster start from them than we did from the Oxford crew. But let's introduce your crew lineups. We saw them there at a glance, but let's introduce you to the individuals we've got lining up. So firstly, Adriana Perez Rotondo in the bow seat for Cambridge, a blue boat, a blue vest holder. She was in last year's 2021 race in Ely. Blondie the year before that, so a seasoned athlete for Cambridge. The Spanish athlete studying engineering, a PhD in computational neuroscience for Newham. And she'll be in that bow seat once again for Cambridge. Sitting in front of her, this is the last minute addition to this Cambridge crew, Jo Matthews. She's stepping up from Blondie last year. This was a last minute call up in order to get this race underway, because unfortunately Sarah Portsmouth not able to be in today's crew. Interesting to see whether that will change any of the speed that we saw from Cambridge just 2 weeks ago. Paige Badenhorst in the 3-seat, the South African junior worlds athlete, a bit of international experience at junior level, but here now studying for an MPhil in management at Magdalen College. It's a debut for her if she gets announced in tomorrow's crew. Again, we must remind you that these are not yet the firm Blue Boat lineups. We'll have to wait for the announcement tomorrow on the 7th of March to confirm who will be sat where. Ruby Chu in the 4-seat, the New Zealand international, is back in the middle of the boat once again. She's the Olympian who starred in the New Zealand women's quad at Tokyo last year, come across with her fellow New Zealander Grace Prendergast to study for an MBA at Queen's College. She was also at the Rio Olympics back in 2016. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of New Zealanders tuning in to see how their athletes are getting on in such a prestigious set of fixtures. In front of Ruby Chu in the 5-seat, great to see Bronya Sykes back after illness a couple of weeks ago. She was unable to compete in that first fixture against Oxford Brookes, but the returning blue looking to hold on to her seat this year. She's going to be joined by, again, another change in the 6th seat, moving Quiva Dempsey up to that all-important rhythmical transfer seat, the 6th seat there. Represented Ireland at the under-23 European Championships and an up-and-coming Irish international. Grace Prendergast. Now, you'd be hard-pressed to not know who Grace Prendergast is, the best female athlete in the world, one of the best rowers in the world, in fact, I would say. 4-time world champion in the women's 8 and the women's pair. Absolutely sensational New Zealand superstar, and it's amazing to have her here studying at Cambridge after that emphatic gold and silver at the Tokyo Olympics last year. She's studying for a Master of Philosophy. And then Imogen Grant, we've got an Olympic stern pair here for Cambridge, and the lightweight who came 4th at the Tokyo Olympic Games in the lightweight double sculls with Emily Craig representing Great Britain, is now turning her hand to the stroke seat here. She's been in the blue boat twice before, having started to learn to row at Cambridge. She's ridden through the ranks, through Blondie, through the blue boats, but often found a lot further back, which is why I think we're quite excited to see what she can do when given the keys in the stroke seat here. She's continuing to study medicine, having had that gap to take part in the Olympic Games last year, but she's back now studying at Trinity College, Cambridge. And into the Cox's seat, Jasper Parish, the Henley Royal Regatta finalist. This would be, again, if he gets announced in tomorrow's crew lineup, his debut for Cambridge in the blue boat. And I'm sure very excited to have that opportunity with such a strong crew.
Well, we can see after that Cambridge introduction, the race between Blondie, the Cambridge University Women's Reserve, on the right of your picture, and Leander B, the Leander women, on the left of your picture. And they are just on the start of this race. We think it's probably down to Chiswick Steps. We're showing you these pictures. There's the umpire giving them the start. And those crews will come past our camera on the balcony of Thames Rowing Club, one of the Embankment's great clubs. And looks a pretty decent start by Leander on the left of the picture there, Camilla.
Yeah, really good start from Leander. And they've got a couple of athletes who we mentioned that have been bumped down into this B crew. One that I mentioned, Natasha Harris-White, who was in the A crew just 2 weeks ago. So definitely strengthened and certainly getting the better of the provisional Blondie crew at the moment. Yeah, almost a length. In fact, I think there's going to be clear water between the stern of the Leander boat and the bow of the Cambridge boat as they come past Thames here where our camera is. And just really lively, a bit like their A crew, Crossy. Leander just looking really lively off the start.
Yeah, lovely conditions as well. They look great, don't they? Bowside strokes in that Leander boat. So you've got the stroke woman with her blade on the left-hand side of the boat, and a really confident start. Good cover, I think. Ratings up high, but decent cover from that Leander crew. Sorry, we've lost that picture there. We were going to wait to see Blondie, the Cambridge Reserve boat, just come through. Nearly a length down from that race. This is live TV, so we have all sorts of upsets. There we are. We're not quite as interesting as the race going on, but what an impressive start from the Leander crew there, Camilla.
Yeah, really impressive start from the Leander crew, and I'm will be intrigued to hear whether the Cambridge second crew can come back on them at all. A nice experienced Cox in the driving seat for Cambridge. We've got to remember Dylan Whitaker, who's been bumped down from his blue boat seat last year to now steering what could be the reserves crew. If anyone's going to have the experience to be able to bring that Cambridge crew back and tell them where they are on the course, drive them to rowing through, it's going to be Dylan Whitaker. And they do seem to be clawing back a little bit here.
Yeah, a little bit, but that's a big margin. That's half a length, 3/4 of a length of clear water that Leander have in this piece. Cambridge are on the Surrey station. They'll have that bend maybe to fight some meters back on Leander as they go round past Hammersmith Bridge. But I guess that shows the strength of Leander crews more so than it's the strength of the Cambridge women.
Yeah, the depth of the Leander crew is pretty astounding, and we'll see their A crew in just a second when we go through the lineup. But you've got to say that Leander's women's squad just growing in strength and depth under the guidance and leadership of Ross Hunter, and definitely showing that in that reserves race. So we'll bring you the result of that as soon as we can. We'll be updated on that as soon as possible. But in the meanwhile, we were talking about Leander's A crew that will be facing that Cambridge crew that we just went through. So let's see the runners and riders now for Leander A. In the bow seat, back again, Daisy Bellamy, the under-23 world champion from last year's under-23s. She got a gold in the women's four, which she stroked to victory. She then went on to win the Island Challenge Cup in its inaugural year at Henley Royal Regatta. She's a former Oxford Brookes athlete, so stepping to Leander, making that next step up the ladder to try and continue her international aspirations. In front of her, Sam Corty. We talked about Sam a few moments ago, returning to racing, returning to competitive rowing, having had back surgery quite recently. She missed out having qualified for the Olympic Games through the World Championships in 2019, qualified one of the British boats. But unfortunately, but due to injury, has had to miss out on that Olympic Games process. And I'm sure she'll be going for Paris once again. So she's back racing at Leander, a two-time under-23 medalist. That'll be a great addition to this Leander crew. Juliet Perry sits at 3, and she's no stranger to the boat race and its fixture series, having raced the blue boat for Oxford back in 2018, and again making that step to Leander after graduation. Another seasoned athlete who was the Wargrave Challenge Cup winner for Henley Royal Regatta in 2021 as part of that hugely impressive Leander squad that won the majority of the women's events last year. Izzy Powell sits at 4, learnt to row at University College London, so no stranger to the tideway, a great influence to have in the middle of the boat if the conditions get choppy out there on the water, knows what the Thames can do, and a hugely impressive academic rowing career, having won gold medals at the World University Championships, at the British University Championships as part of the UL squad, and now in the middle of the boat for Leander Club. Another Izzy. So we got Izzy Powell followed by Izzy Hawes, and it's Izzy Hawes in her 4th year of rowing now at Leander Club, having raced previously for Oxford Brookes, and rather impressively worked on the ICU units through COVID. as a physiotherapy student, so doing a lot of work throughout the pandemic for people alongside her rowing career. So great to see that. And an under-23 European bronze medalist as well in last year's European under-23s in the women's four. Susie Deer, and we talked about Susie a couple of weeks ago when Leander faced Oxford. That was her first return to competitive racing for quite some time, but great to see her back again, and just lots of experience under her belt. Another former Oxford Brookes athlete in this Leander crew. There's plenty of them that have moved to train and race in Henley. Was part of the Olympic squad. She was the training spare for Tokyo 2020 and a winner of both the Hambledon Pairs Challenge Cup and the Remenham 8 at last year's Henley Royal Regatta. So a huge influence there at 6, Susie Deer. At 7, Annie Campbell-Ord, who is backing up Meg Slabbert, who we'll see in a second in the stroke seat. She learnt to row in the Midlands at Nottingham Rowing Club and has just joined Leander for this season's of racing. Her previous experience was winning the Home International Regatta in a double scull before stepping on to race at Leander. Meg Slabbert in the stroke seat. She's having learnt to row in the USA at high school. She then came across to represent Great Britain at the Under-23 World Championships, and very successful at that she was, as well as silver medalist from those championships over in Sarasota. Another one who's very familiar with the tideway, having raced with the UL for the majority of last season with the University of London. So again, a great person to have setting the rhythm, who understands the conditions, understands the course. Meg Slabbert, I'm sure, will do just as good a job as she did 2 weeks ago. And finally, a change in cocks for Leander in this fixture. Morgan Bainham-Williams steps in for Erin Kennedy, who we saw 2 weeks ago taking this crew down the course. Not a shabby replacement, though, a multiple under-23 cocks and boat race winner herself, in fact, for Oxford. So again, if anyone's going to know how to steer this course, how to get the best out of her crew into these conditions on the tideway, it's certainly going to be Morgan Bainham-Williams. And she's also training to be a firefighter, Crossy. So absolutely amazing. Well, in fact, she is currently a firefighter. She's not training to be. She works for the Henley Fire Brigade. So she's absolutely smashing everything in life. And there are your crews side by side that we'll see facing each other in just a moment's time.
So that's our camera out on the launch, which is going to be following this race. And that's the Leander crew that you just heard Camilla run through the order. Morgan Bainham-Williams, the cocks with those yellow gloves on. It is a cold day, isn't it? Particularly for coxes, with that northeasterly breeze. But with the tide coming in, I think it means that the water, certainly on this bit of the course, is pretty benign, pretty flat in terms of the tideway conditions. And I guess we've got the Cambridge crew in the distance there. Still a few minutes to the start. This race scheduled to go off at 13:47. They're going to be a little bit late. You can see some of the rowers there, just one of the scullers coming down on the tideway. The river's not actually closed, so you can kind of get all sorts of boats and craft out for these fixture races, which is kind of what makes them so interesting. But the Leander crew in the reserve race, Leander B, certainly handed it to Blondie, the Cambridge women's reserves, in the start phase. They absolutely hammered the start and took, well, clearly almost a length of clear water, which had grown by the time they got past Thames Rowing Club to half a length of clear water. So we saw Leander go off very fast against Oxford and take a lead in the early stages of the race. And then we saw Oxford very impressively row back through. There we see the Cambridge boat. That's our first look at them, isn't it? And Grace Prendergast in the stern, 2 from the left of your picture, Imogen Grant in the stroke seat. just tap turning it round as they float under the tube bridge, Putney Tube Bridge. The next bridge is Putney Road Bridge, so they'll just paddle off to Putney Road Bridge and then easy the boat, stop rowing, in other words, and get ready for the start. So if you're joining us for this fixture series presented by Ludum of the 2022 Gemini boat race, welcome. We're very glad to have your company. We've shown you part of the film so far of Blondie versus Leander B, which is the reserves race. This is the main event, the Cambridge University Boat Club Women on the left of your picture there, on the Surrey side of the course, and Leander's A crew, they are on the Middlesex side of the course and on the right of your picture, and both crews are paddling down together. The start is fairly imminent in this race. They will paddle down as far as Putney Bridge, which you can see the crews are just about to pass under, and then they will stop rowing, get aligned, and I'm not quite sure who the umpire is of this race, but probably someone like Sarah Winkless, I would have thought.
Please. Right over towards the buttress.
Yeah, we'll see the umpire in just a moment's time for this race, but nice to see them paddling together towards that start line. They'll sort of drift now and do their final preparations before setting off. And we've obviously got them on these particular stations for this first piece.
I think if Leander go off fast, it's going to make it really interesting for Cambridge. Just Grace Prendergast just having a little word to Bronya Sykes, her president there. Just maybe a little G up.
And it must be interesting for Quiver Dempsey as well, who you can see in the 6th seat, sat just behind Prendergast, who is going to have to pretty quickly sort of moulded to that 6th seat, having been further back in the boat, and probably will be further back in the boat for race day, you know, assuming that we get Sarah Portsmouth back in the lineup tomorrow.
Yeah, and yeah, I did say talking to Bronya Sykes, she was actually talking to Quiver Dempsey, and maybe that's just the experience of Prendergast, just saying, you know, got your back there, you get mine. Jasper Parrish with his hands up, the computer scientist, and the crews are off. That's a nice easy first stroke from Cambridge. I just wonder if Leander will be a little bit more aggressive as Cambridge wind up. You can see Leander already have a lead there. They've been much more aggressive off the start, Camilla.
Yeah, they really have. And we saw this 2 weeks ago. I think they took Oxford by surprise, and they're really using this start to their advantage. They'll know that's a huge strength to build on. And wow, they've really taken some distance. I'd say that's about equal to the start they had over Oxford in that first piece 2 weeks ago, Crossy.
Yeah, the umpire's warning Leander to get away from Cambridge and stop washing them down. But I do think, you know, looking at the way that Cambridge took it off, they were very conservative in the first couple of strokes, weren't they? They didn't really blast it off. I wouldn't call that a blast-off start. So perhaps they just want to get into their rhythm. They have an overlap now. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Oxford rode through Leander just as we were coming round the outside of that Middlesex bend. This is our camera from Thames Rowing Club, and you can see Cambridge women 3/4 of length down, and I can't see that they're going to settle for that distance as we go through, but Leander there, very impressive, aren't they?
Yeah, hugely impressive. But look, here come Cambridge. I think they are starting to chip away now. And almost I think that this is a bit of a boat race tactic, because if you think about the amount of stuff that's going on at the start on race day that will get on the 3rd of April, the wash, the press, the launches, the crowds, the noise, that they can't get overwhelmed off the start, right? Those first few strokes are important to get right, as we've seen in previous boat race days, you know, blades that slip, crabs that get catched. That's more important to get right than for it to be extremely fast and powerful. Whereas Leander don't have that worry or issue to think about in a few weeks' time. They're just worried about winning this fixture.
So Cambridge Moving back on Leander, you can see the margin there. That is Leander crew from our camera following the race. You can see Meg Slabbert there, the 24-year-old in the stroke seat behind her, Annie Campbell-Ord, 26, in the 7 seats. And wow, what a move back by Cambridge. This is going in a very similar way to the race we saw Leander have against Oxford, Camilla.
Yeah, really similar way. And Leander, I wonder what lessons they've learned. They've got a new Cox in the driving seat, Morgan Bain and Williams, who won't have had that experience of 2 weeks ago. I'm sure she's been briefed on what is expected of this Leander crew through the middle section of the race. But it's a whole new ball game now. Look at the seat difference between Leander and Cambridge. It seems like Leander have responded somewhat, but the length that Cambridge are getting here, absolutely astounding considering the differences in height between Grant and Prendergast here, Crossy.
Yeah, it really is. And I guess it's not a surprise when you've got the number 1 female oarswoman in the world, Grace Prendergast, in the 7 seat. We are, as you can see, just getting a little blurriness of our pictures following this race as we go in and out of signal. But there you see Leander just in the lead fractionally from Cambridge. This race is going to go through Hammersmith Bridge, round the first bend, and then it's going to they're going to race until Chiswick Steps, which is at the end of Chiswick A, just over halfway on the boat race course. And you can see that light blue dot of Cambridge just tracking ever so closely, that bend unwinding now. Leander have had their advantage, and I do believe Cambridge are going to be going through Leander. Shame we haven't got the pictures on that to show you, but look at Cambridge move on Leander. That's a sensational move. Oh, and we've got our pictures. They're not quite down. The dots were giving us perhaps a little false picture, but Cambridge, there we are, jumping. No, they were. The dots were right, weren't they?
Yeah, pictures are just catching up here, but those that GPS mapping that we were getting from Ludum, absolutely spot on. That Cambridge have now taken the lead as we've passed Fulham Football Club. The advantage for Leander has waned; it's worn off, and almost it goes to show you the amount of work that Cambridge were putting in to stick and even move on the Leander advantage of the bend. But it's getting choppier here. Look at this wind catching this part of the course here as we run through to Hammersmith. This is going to be quite a challenge for the Coxes now, Martin.
It is going to be a challenge for the Coxes, and it's going to be fascinating to see how much that Cambridge crew can edge out. I think they raced, Oxford raced Leander up to Hammersmith Bridge, so not quite as long a course as this race will be, but I'd say that Cambridge have more on Leander at this stage of the race than Oxford did.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, Martin. I think that Cambridge at this point have broken clear water. I don't think we ever got Oxford never had that pleasure 2 weeks ago. They never managed to quite shake off that elastic band that Leander cast over them when they tried to row away. Leander have got all the work here to do, having broken that clear water, and Morgan Bain and Williams is going to have to be telling Meg Slabbert in the stroke seat, as we said, Annie Campbell-Ord, that stern pair, going to have to keep Leander calm, keep them rhythmical, and Susie Deer in the 6th seat transferring the rhythm. And it doesn't look like a bad rhythm at all here. You know, we talked about how strong the Leander crew were. They've certainly got the power and the strength, and their rhythm not looking too bad. But Cambridge here, that length, I'm just absolutely mesmerised by how long they look through the water here, Crossy.
Yeah, and I think what's happened, they're not chasing it on the front end. The blades are very close at the front end. They're very well linked up cohesively together, and they wait for the water to suck up the blade. They don't come back on it straight away, so you've got that really long length of stroke, as well as the fact, you know, you've got someone like Grace Prendergast in the 7th seat coming right round the pin at the front end, and that advantage that Jasper Parrish, the Cox, you can see his back just going away from us there in the Cambridge boat. He is now steering the inside lane on the Surrey bend, look across the Leander crew, and he's going to want to really edge that margin out, send a message to the Oxford women about the speed of Cambridge, who are rowing with a sub on board. You heard Camilla talk about Joe Matthews coming into the boat for Sarah Portsmouth, and that's half a length of clear water the Cambridge boat has now. In fact, more than half a length of clear water, probably a length of clear water by our GPS dots coming up to Hammersmith Bridge.
Yeah, and it's going to be a familiar sight for Jasper Parrish as he turns the corner to come underneath Hammersmith Bridge with the steering wire for Cambridge University. He'll go past his old school, St Paul's School, London, where Parrish was a member of the club there. And I see it's a very familiar path trodden, isn't it? St Paul's School to the boat race to come and Cox here on what would have been your home water crossing.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I'm just struck. We heard the introductions of that Leander crew, and people like Slabbert, Campbell, Ord, Deere, Hawes, Powell, Perry, Corty, and Bellamy. And what success they've had at under 23s, and they just couldn't compete as Cambridge came through them and started to get level after that very fast start again. And Cambridge just moving away. The race has probably got another 2.5, 3 minutes to go as we go around that big Surrey bend to the left there through to Chiswick Steps, where we expect this race to finish.
Yeah, and Cambridge seem to be still extending their lead, which is all very important. They're going to need to really race themselves, I guess, at this point in time. But we've got to remember all these fixtures, it's about experience for these boat race crews to be in positions that make them uncomfortable, positions where they are comfortable, and learning how to control the conditions and everything else. This is a practice run for them for what is going to happen in just under a month's time, and it's very conceivable they could be in this position against Oxford, so they need to use every single stroke to their advantage. Great close-up shot there of Meg Slabbert in the stroke seat for Leander, and that experience that she's got of under 23s, all her racing from UL, just like you say, not even knocking any spots off Cambridge at all.
Yeah, Morgan Bain Williams is steering her boat into the puddles you can see created by the blades of the Cambridge University women's boat, who are out there in the front. So a little bit more of a bumpy ride for the Leander A crew women, but that length generated by the stern pair, Imogen Grant in the stroke seat, and behind her the world's number one oarswoman, Grace Prendergast, 29 years of age, Grace Prendergast, I think. And they are moving around as they come to Chiswick Out. That's definitely something like a length, maybe going out to a length and a half of clear water that the Cambridge women have. There is probably around about 90 seconds of this race to go as they go to one of the boat race landmarks, Chiswick Steps.
It'll be great for this crew to come round this bend in a competitive fashion, because the last time they'll have been able to do that was trial 8, which again for Cambridge was postponed, remember, because of COVID in December. So they need to really grasp every opportunity they get to row the course to this length. Even 2 weeks ago, they only got to Hammersmith, so this will be the first competitive environment they've managed to get this edge on the bend. And there we go. That means that we've reached the end of this piece. And what would you say that is? A couple of lengths, Crossy, to Cambridge? Much more decisive than Oxford.
Yeah, I mean, it was a longer piece. I'd say it was about 2.5, 3 lengths. I think it's maybe a couple of lengths of clear water by the time you look at it there. And it did follow a similar pattern. And the Oxford women did row Leander down, but Cambridge seemed to row away from them imperiously. And with that sub on board, I guess what impressed me, I kind of thought, the start was very comfortable for Cambridge, and it seemed they were just in their own race. They were pretty confident about their rhythm, and they weren't too bothered about. They would have known about Leander's fast start. They weren't too bothered about letting Leander have 3/4 of a length, 2/3 of a length at the beginning of that race.
Yeah, and do you know what? It's I was just thinking back to their piece against Oxford Brookes, and in fact, I think Oxford Brookes probably gave Cambridge a better race. I know it was a shorter piece, so we wouldn't be expecting quite as much distance between the two crews. But I would say Oxford Brookes actually gave Cambridge a better race 2 weeks ago than Leander did throughout the whole of that piece there, and most of that, like you say, was down to rhythm in the middle part, rhythm, length, ensuring that they can hold that and sustain that for what will be, near on 20 minutes on the 3rd of April. That's the most important thing for them to get right, not the first 30 seconds that go in front of the crowds at Putney. They can be down at that point as long as they cross the line first in 4 weeks' time. That's what's going to matter to them. And they know, I think that will give them a lot of confidence there, that if they're in that same situation with Oxford, they'll definitely be able to do that based on the both crews now having raced Leander.
I just wonder whether, with that result, and we will see a second piece between the Cambridge University women and Leander. I just wonder whether Cambridge have rode themselves into boat race favourites for the contest on April the 3rd. I mean, if on the basis of that race, I was to ask you who's going to win the women's boat race, Camilla, what would you be saying?
I think I'd have to say Cambridge, which is, look, I think 2 weeks ago, Oxford surprised us more than we were expecting them to, right? Because on paper, you look at the caliber of athlete that Cambridge have recruited in your Ruby Chews, your Grace Prendergast, you've got someone like Imogen Grant coming back into the boat. Like, you just say, there's no way that you could overhaul that sense of power. And then Oxford turned around last week and, grit their teeth, rode through what we perceived to be, and what we've explained again today is a hugely stacked Leander crew. We've got under 23 medalists galore. We've got people that qualified boats for the Olympics in that Leander crew. Like, it's not a slow crew. And so I think 2 weeks ago we thought, hey, Oxford had come out and surprised us. They could really give Cambridge a race here. But that right there has just showed us that Cambridge are on another level, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. So a very impressive row from the Cambridge women. We're sorry we had picture problems in the middle of that race, and we couldn't bring you everything from the camera following the launches. But I think you got the idea that it was a hugely impressive victory by the Cambridge women, coached by Paddy Ryan, and he's got a great relationship with his crew, and I think particularly the two stars of his crew, who would be Imogen Grant and Grace Prendergast. And I think I'm going to be delighted with that race. It'll be fast. I always find it fascinating after you've had a fairly comprehensive race verdict, what the story is going to be for the second part of this race. Do Leander change their tactics? Do they go off more conservatively to think they'll get into a better rhythm? To Cambridge try and blast off the start a little bit more than they did?
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I think what we saw last time when Oxford were in a really similar position, right, down off the start, but managed to row through. We saw Oxford come back with a more dynamic start in the second piece, and I'm sure Cambridge, if they were to evaluate what went right, what could be improved on, for that last piece that we just saw. Yes, the start's the really obvious one for us to look at, right? But it might be intentional. And now we're sort of shifting now to one of the bonus fixtures that we're going to get on the course, which is the Oxford Women versus Oxford Brookes. And this is what potentially will be tomorrow's blue boat when it's announced, on the left hand side of your picture, and that Brookes crew that we were talking about that faced Cambridge 2 weeks ago on the right hand side of your picture. So again, another direct comparison, like we've just been talking about with Leander.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting. And you see the Coxes with their hands up, Oxford Brookes on the right of your picture, and the Oxford University Women's Boat Club on the left of your picture. And this will shortly be a start given in this race. Fox has still got their hand up. Really.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to remember, Martin, what we caught of this race when it was Brookes versus Cambridge 2 weeks ago. I think Cambridge got the better out of the start, didn't they? But it was just, it was overlap. It was quite close.
Yeah, they did.
So we'd be expecting the same from the Oxford women if they've got any sort of, comparator. And if we're looking for a close race, we'd expect the Oxford women here to go out in front.
Finally, Brookes look to be heading for the Surrey bank. You see a very definite steer round, unless Balside were pulling the boat round in the Brookes boat. The Oxford boat with Julia Lindsay, Amelia Standing, Christine Cavallo coming into the boat, the American lightweight oarswoman in the 3 seat, Anya Zafus, Anastasia Posner in the 5 seat, Gabrielle Smith, the Canadian Olympian in 6, Erin Relic, the American world champion in the 7 seat, and Annie Adzakis, the Aussie in the stroke seat, coxed by Joe Gellert, the former Hampton School cox. And that is the Oxford Blue boat on the far side of your picture. It looks like a pretty even race, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does look a pretty even race, and Brookes are very good with sticking with the crews, and certainly they're pretty sharp off the start themselves. And as they come past this Thames camera, we'll get a sense for the seat numbers going up against one another. We've just jumped there to Cambridge. It looks like lining up for their next piece, and we'll be going to that in just a second.
They are. Yeah, this is Fast and Furious, isn't it? This is the second piece, as we saw the Oxford women take a slight lead over the Oxford Brookes women. And that's certainly what Cambridge managed to do in this fixture last week. Cambridge, I don't know if they're going to be paddling into this. They were paddling up level with Leander. Both crews, maybe they're doing a running start, Camilla.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense for the point on the course that we're on, right? Is, do a rolling start, get into race pace. And I think that's probably what we'll see now, with Leander getting a slight advantage here off the start, I think, based on the results of the previous piece.
Yeah, you don't want to be letting the crew next to you just get a little bit of an advantage. There they go, blasting off the start. Leander with that really aggressive back-ended stroke.
They shortened up a lot, didn't they, Martin?
Yeah.
Meg Slabbert there chose to, even with the rolling start, she chose to attack it like a starting sequence, and they're still really up on the rating. Look, 40 strokes a minute for Leander Club on our graphics there in comparison to 37 for Cambridge.
Yeah, well, Leander have got the outside of that bend, and they know they've got to be competitive early on, because what they do want is the inside of the Barnes Bridge bend. They don't want Cambridge to have rode through them and move over and take their water, because that will make the end of this race so much more difficult. Great shot of Imogen Grant there, the 26-year-old medic leading her boats really, really effectively. She's a great stroke woman. I thought she stroked that British women's double in the Tokyo Olympics superbly. And it's nice to see her making a transition to sweep. Sorry, Camilla.
Well, I was going to say she's back to her roots here, really, though, Crossy, because she learned to row at Cambridge, remember? So her first experience of rowing was sweep. It was going through that Blondie cycle, stepping up to the blue boat. She only tried sculling in order to trial, because you have to. So actually, this is back to a little bit more, I guess, familiarity of her early days of rowing. So I'm not surprised to see her looking so comfortable there in that stroke seat.
Yeah, and Cambridge just moving away as they like from Leander. Leander on this side of the course. Meg Slabbert took the crew off at 40 strokes a minute. They've settled to 36, which is a 1 pip in rating higher than Cambridge's 35. But, Leander have got to do something now. Otherwise, Cambridge will just continue to move and take the inside of the Barnes Bridge bend, which is kind of what Jasper Parrish will be hoping for. And Leander, this is where they really have to dig in, don't they? I mean, it's so important for them not to lose the overlap at this stage of the race. And they are hanging on.
They are hanging on, probably much better than they did in the previous piece. But we've got to remember that in that previous piece, they had the advantage of the bend, and that's very much Cambridge's camp now. They've got that advantage round this huge bend, one of the biggest advantages on this championship course. But Leander doing well to defend it. I think certainly that bow ball seems to be sticking on the 4 seat of Ruby Chew in the Cambridge crew and not slipping back too far.
Yeah, this is a great row from Leander. They did get bested by, you know, a couple of lengths of clear water roundabout in that first piece. But Cambridge moving out ever so slightly. Leander can't let the Cambridge crew lose contact, because then Jasper Parrish, the Cambridge cops, there's his back. Just and take the inside lane on Barnes Bridge, and it'll make Leander's job even harder. Grace Prendergast laying it down there. The Kiwi from the South Island, from the Avon Rowing Club.
I can't see if she's actually saying something, Chrissy. Can you see her mouth moving? And I don't know whether it's her saying something to the crew at the finish of the stroke, or whether it's just her exhaling. She rows really rounded to her own side, doesn't she? She's very sort of lent to bow side. And look at this, Leander coming right back now that the advantage has petered out for Cambridge. This is a huge move from them.
It is a big move, and you know, that is going to feel so motivational for the Leander crew to be in contact when they were out of contact for so much of the last race. And they've got the bend round to their right. As you look at it, River will bend round to the finish. There's Barnes Bridge. You can see the crews will have to make a turn towards the right, towards the Middlesex bank. And this is a real test for Cambridge now, isn't it? You sense that, you know, they're really sticking it in. And Leander just fractionally moving back on them, but they're going to have to move on the outside of the bend. So now we're going to see what this Cambridge women's crew are made of.
Yeah, they seem to be holding well. They've responded well, but if there's anyone that I back in this particular section of the course, it's Morgan Bain and Williams, who's coxing that Leander Club crew. Remember back in 2016 when she steered the Oxford Blue boat to victory, this was the part of the course that she knew so well, navigating this piece towards Barnes when we had all those awful conditions, and Morgan was absolutely spot on in the right place of the river that she needed to be to gain the most advantage she could over Cambridge during those horrendous conditions. And so Morgan knows this bit of water like the back of her hand, so she's going to be pushing Cambridge the whole way into the worst water. Yeah,
you can do a handbrake turn right as you come under Barnes Bridge, and you can eke out to something like, you know, a canvas, you know, quarter of a length on your opposition who are on the outside. And Cambridge running into the wind, still with that lead over Leander, but Leander up at 37 strokes a minute. They're not waiting for the finish at all. Meg Slabbert and Annie Campbell have really set an amazing rhythm. They've got the advantage on the inside of that bend, and it looks like Leander, just by our graphic dots, you can see there, Leander in the pink, Cambridge in the
look at that
blue
line, sorry Chrissy, you could see it there on the GPS really well, that handbrake turn you were talking about. I don't know if we can go back to that image at all, but you could see the line that Morgan Bain and Williams took towards the Middlesex bank. It was like a U shape, and it showed on the GPS her getting into that really good water, and they are really fighting. They look fantastic here now into this final section of the course, and it's making such a difference. They're almost drawing in.
Yeah, they're going to be much more pleased with this second piece, aren't they? Ross Hunter's crew with the advantage. They hadn't let Cambridge get away, and Meg Slabbert really driving the crew on 37 strokes a minute. Imogen Grant, well, they haven't really gone for it yet. Cambridge between 36 to 37. Be interested to see what they do with a sprint. I guess they're going to be strongest in their rhythm.
They do, their blade work's just got a little bit scrappier though, Martin. I don't know if you can see that there, but they just look a little bit, you know, you were saying how well they were locking on in that first piece. The blades just look a little bit wayward in the water, you know, as they're placing. They're not quite as solid as they were in that first piece, and I don't know if that's because they've been a little bit rattled by Leander now being so close.
Yeah, the New Zealand Women's 8 had a fantastic finish in the Tokyo Olympics, and well, they're just moving out to something like 3/4 of a length. That's an impressive performance from Cambridge, just when I guess Leander might have sensed blood that they could go back through them. Cambridge have held them off.
Look at the Leander wind now here, Crossy. The blades weaving in and out. They're going to have to keep watch, because this is what could happen on the day. Look at the speed Leander are picking up into the final few strokes. They're drawing level, and that's really sharp there from the crew on the right-hand side of your picture.
Yeah, just what they wanted. They wanted the inside of that Middlesex bend, and Cambridge still have a lead, but it's going to be oh so close, and I think that the Oxford women are going to be pleased when they see the result of this race, to see how competitive Leander were. Oxford Women beat Leander twice 2 weeks ago. And, wow, look at the drive from that Leander rate. They've really sensed they can have a go at the opposition, and that's motivated them. Cambridge still in the lead. There's the finish post coming up, just the last few strokes. Maybe we can get a pull-out shot to see where the Cambridge women are, but that's the Leander finish that you see coming up to the finish. Last few strokes now.
Okay, wind down by crease.
Cambridge just in front, I think, Camilla.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be about a third of a length, half a length maybe, to Cambridge, but they had to work hard for that. Look how exhausted
They are,
that
aren't they?
whole crew are. That certainly was not a walk in the park, and they would have had to have ratcheted through their whole finish sequence there as if they were side by side on the day.
Yeah, they would have had to have done. Great test for, you have to be said, you know, if you wanted to have a test for your crew, and Paddy Ryan, the Cambridge coach, would have wanted a test. That he could have seen none better than that, really, in that second piece that the two crews did. They were really tested, and I think that's what you want from these fixtures, isn't it? You want your crews tested, and you want to take that back and take away and say, okay, how do we respond to that?
And I think it's why the crews that are selected for these fixtures, the likes of Leander, Oxford Brookes, we'll see, like we said, the Dutch under-23s coming over later in a few weeks' time. That's why they're some of the best academic and also international crews in the world, because they really need to be tested. And even if they lose these fixtures, right, and on occasion the boat race crews have gone down to people like Oxford Brookes, it's valuable experience, and it gives them the tools that they need and the learnings that they need to make changes in such a short amount of time. Because remember, we're only 4 weeks out from the boat race. They've got very minimal training time now, once the crews are announced tomorrow, to make some of these changes that they'll need to. So the more they can learn, the better, I guess.
Yeah, so do you think that gives the Oxford women a bit of heart? We saw them, didn't we, race Oxford Brookes A crew, but we cut away to see to follow the second half of this race.
Yeah, I think so. I think it did look like Oxford Brookes and Oxford were much closer than Cambridge versus Oxford Brookes. But that second piece, if Oxford can come back as well as they did against Leander, and Cambridge's second half isn't quite as strong, which we saw there, perhaps once they're a little bit tired, things start falling apart a little bit. It opens the door just a little, and with good coxing, like we saw there, good steering, good discipline, there is an opportunity. There's always an opportunity, and you never know what race day is going to be like, and what the conditions are going to be like. So yeah, any small opening. And I think that was one there. We saw, those final few strokes for Cambridge, that last kind of 300-400 meters, they didn't have it in the tank to keep pushing off Leander. And so I think Oxford will see that as an opportunity, and they'll take that, bet your bottom dollar Oxford will come back and watch this, right, afterwards, and say, what were Cambridge doing? What do we need to really capitalise on?
So let's remind ourselves of where we are in the day. Have a look at the timetable of races. We've seen Cambridge University women race Leander. Two pieces that they had. We've seen off the start the Oxford University women just narrowly lead Oxford Brookes. We'll bring you the result of that race when we get it. The next race that we might see from our camera is off at 14:27. That is the Oxford Reserve Boat ISIS versus Leander B crew. And then we hopefully will have a camera. We're planning to, again, in the Oxford University men, the blue boat, sort of nominal blue boat versus Leander A, which we're very excited about seeing. Hopefully we can follow that a little longer than just from our camera at Thames Rowing Club. Cambridge University men, Goldie, the reserves, against Oxford Brookes B crew. And then the final fixture, Cambridge University men against the Oxford Brookes A crew. And we'll talk you through those crews nearer the time. So we've still got lots of racing left. Don't go away anywhere. We'll try and bring you through that. But I think you can see the tideway looks good today, doesn't it? I mean, there's that northeasterly wind. it's a kind of a nice tailwind. It's probably, it was probably a similar wind to this, that when the Cambridge men got that record in the boat race of, what was it, 16 minutes, 19 seconds. And I guess it would have been a similar kind of breeze to today, which is a tailwind on most of the course, which is kind of not going to ruffle the water too much.
Yeah, you could do without all of those additional factors. I know it makes it great for us and great for watching, but for the crews, it's just another element that they can only prepare using the water that's on display for the fixtures, right? And in their training, and if it doesn't rile up, if the wind doesn't sort of act in their favor or against them, they may not have had much practice. But yeah, it's about as good as it can be today, which is fantastic for the crews, less so for the drama, but certainly, they'll be pleased that they can execute as good a race as they can in the conditions that they have. That's not an element they have to factor in.
Yeah, I just wonder, in terms of the races we're looking for, Oxford's the next race we're going to be looking at, following down, hopefully, is Oxford's Blue Boat against Leander. I mean, there's been so much said about the amazing lineup that Oxford have managed to put together. Internationals from Switzerland and
America,
USA
yeah.
and GB, and I think, we were talking just before we went on air that there are 4 blues in the reserve boat, the ISIS boat for Oxford, which shows the strength of the blue boat.
Yeah, and we'll get the, we've been saying all morning that we're talking about the blue boat, we're talking about ISIS, we're talking about Goldie. This will all be from tomorrow. We can say, provisionally, these are the announced crews, and that's at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, Monday the 7th of March. We'll get the official Gemini boat race crew announcement for this year. But the blue boat is not the blue boat until it puts that boat on the water on the day of the race. We've still got a few weeks to go, but provisionally what Oxford are looking to announce tomorrow, and if this lineup that we've got competing today is anything like what we'll hear announced tomorrow by Sean Bowden's crew, it's pretty scarily good, and I cannot wait to see it race in the lineup that we have, because we've not seen much of them. You're right, and they're always very quiet on social media. Oxford, OUBC, especially on the men's side, we don't get much. We've seen a bit of their training indoors, a little bit on the erg, from the likes of some of those internationals that you've mentioned, but on the water, this lineup has got people that didn't even compete in trial eights, right? We've got Angus Groom coming back into the mix after his injury. We didn't see him compete at trial eights. There's a lot of people that were split in those trial eight crews that we commentated on. We talk about those 4 blues that have missed out, and well, could miss out depending on the crew announcement tomorrow, but what it looks to be 4 blues from last year not making that top crew. We've not seen them race in these combinations yet. Trial eights was a complete mishmash. So this really strong Oxford crew, let's see if it lives up to expectation.
Yeah, and I know a few of you are texting in on social media for results. We will give you the results of those pieces of the Oxford women up against Oxford Brookes as soon as we have them. They're not available to us at the moment, but we are hunting them down, and we will give you them as soon as we can. So you have seen coverage of, well, there are Leander and ISIS. So ISIS is the reserve crew for the Oxford University Boat Club. Race due off at 14:27, and it looks like ISIS are on Surrey on this station where our camera is on Thames Rowing Club, and Leander are on Middlesex, and there's the start given. ISIS versus Leander B, and that ISIS crew on this side with the dark blue blades: Pete Denton in the bow seat, Chris Rimmer, James Forward, Henry Pearson in the 4 seat, Martin Baraxo, the president, in the 5, Josh Bozeman-Jones, who rode so well in the trial eights race, Tassilo von Mueller in the 7 seat, Augustin Wambase in the stroke seat, and Lewis Corrigan, the Cox. I would have thought Leander are going to find this ISIS crew hard to hold, Camilla.
Yeah, and taking a quick look at the Leander B crew as well. Edward Peacock in the stroke seat, Daniel Bradbury, in the Coxey seat, Daniel Bradbury at stroke, Cameron Bakey at 7, Luke Green at 6, Aidan Murphy at 5, James Pullinger at 4, Stephen Conway at 3, Nick Farrell at 2, and Tristan Grange at bow. They're doing pretty well to hold what is effectively 50% of last year's Blue Boat. And in fact, they are up, I think, by at least a seat coming past the embankment. In fact, no, that's just the angle. I think Oxford there just stretching out to a bit of a lead, but close at this point.
Yeah, a bit of a lead, but close. I think I would have expected Oxford to go away. There is, that's not the umpire in that launch. I think that's the Oxford coach, one of the Oxford coaches, following and videoing the race for debrief.
Yeah, Oxford now extending out. They've almost broken contact before they've reached the end of the embankment, which is a pretty positive place to be in. I think Leander would have quite liked to have been strong off the start, much like their women's squad, if they were to see a chance, because we always know that middle part of the rhythm and the race that the boat race crews train for. You know, that's all they're focusing on at this point in the season, is probably going to be stronger 9 times out of 10.
There's a lot of water between those crews. There was no sort of danger of them fighting for the centre of the stream and clashing. And Louis Corrigan, the Oxford University, the ISIS Cox, in fact, giving that crew quite a wide line round Surrey, and Edward Peacock quite far over towards Middlesex of the line they were following. So it did look as if Oxford's B crew were going to go away and win that race.
Yeah, it did look like that, didn't it? So I think we'll leave that one and we'll start preparing for our next race. Just interestingly having a bit of a look at some of the polls that we've done over the lead up to this fixture series. Looking back to the poll that Ludum held about who we thought would win between Cambridge and Leander and whether it would be over a length or under a length. Almost 60% of you thought that Cambridge would win by over a length over Leander. Now, that certainly was the case in the first piece, so well done if you voted for CUBC Women by over a length. But in that second piece, we've just had confirmation of the results, and it was just a canvas win there by CUBC in that previous race, Peace Crossy. Far smaller than I certainly thought. I'd said, yeah, a third of a length, perhaps half a length, but a canvas. Wow, so close.
Yeah, and also the first piece, the Cambridge Women won by 2 leads, and we just hearing, we didn't see it on screen, that Leander did caught a crab, so one of the blades got caught in the water, slowed the boat down a little bit. So definitely full marks to Leander for making that second piece so competitive. It's very difficult on the outside of that final bend to row down a crew on the inside. You know, if you're very determined and dogged that Leander were, then it's very difficult to row them down. We will be bringing you, our main race that we've definitely got coverage of is the Cambridge Men versus Oxford Brookes. But we hope that we will have a camera following Oxford. I just wonder if we might have a look at the crews, the runners and riders for that race of Oxford against Leander. Leander raced Cambridge, which probably about a month ago now, I think, down at Henley. And the Cambridge crew proved to be the stronger. Now they're going up against Oxford. It's quite a strong Leander crew that we're going to be following. And
yeah, so the Oxford crews that we'll see in just a moment, we can run through the runners and riders who we're expecting from those A crews. So let's go for Leander first. So Leander, we've got Jack Keating in the bow seat for Leander A, Jordan Peppermans in the 2 seat, Rory Harris, the ex-Reading University sculler and under 23 in the 3 seat. Tom Ballinger will sit at 4 for Leander A. In front of him, James Vogel in the 5 seat. And again, someone very familiar to the boat race and to this prestigious event, Felix Drinkhall will sit at 6 for Leander, going up against his alma mater. That'll be really intriguing to see how he gets on the other side of the fence in these fixtures. 7 seat for Leander, Dan Graham, and he'll be backing up James Dolman in the stroke seat, and Wilf LeBrook coxing the Leander crew for Leander A. Now, the OUBCA crew, we've been giving them lots of hype, and rightly so, I think, when you hear this lineup. In the bow seat, Liam Corrigan, who's in the American Men's 8 last year for Tokyo 2020 in Crossy. He's such an athlete.
Yeah,
and he's in the bow seat.
What's he doing in the bow seat? He was stroking the American 8. That's an amazing call for Sean Bowden, the Oxford coach, to put him in the bow seat.
Yeah, hugely interesting to see someone of that caliber sat at bow. But in front of him, David Ambler, the under 23 medalist, a hugely experienced, is it Princeton graduate, I think, David Ambler?
No, Harvard, I think.
Harvard.
Yeah.
And so a really strong, North American contingent at bow pair, both from a university perspective and international perspective. Barnaby Delas at 3, the hugely strong Swiss international that finished 5th in the double sculls at Tokyo 2020, and a huge ergo score for Barnaby Delas, right, to be sat in that 3 seat.
Yeah, he's definitely in the sort of low 640s, and in fact, was I talking to him? Has he pulled 640.0? No, and he was so frustrated that he didn't go 639.9 so he could say sub 640.
I think he'll be one of those athletes, one of those elusive, 11, 12 athletes that have gone sub 540 in no time at all. But he sits at 3 for Oxford OUBCA. Jack Robertson in the 4 seat. He was in the training group for the Australian senior team on the run up to Tokyo. Didn't quite make that squad, but was in the under 23 Aussie 8. Back at the under 23s 2 years ago, last year even. Roman Rossley sits at 5. He was Barnaby Delas's double partner. They're separated by Jack Robertson in this crew lineup, but still in the boat together. You can't tear them apart, Roman and Barnaby. They're even taking on the boat race together. But again, 5th in that double sculls event at Tokyo 2020. Now, here's an exciting one. Charlie Elwes sits at 6 for Oxford. Now, Martin, we thought he did a pretty good job in the stroke seat, in fact, during the Trial 8 event, but Sean Bowden choosing here to put him at 6.
Yeah, well, he has brought something to every crew he's been in. I think, was he in the Radley First 8 as a J15? Have I got that right?
I think so.
Sensational, really. So impressive with Yale, so impressive in the British 8 that got a bronze medal last year in Tokyo. And, he's obviously going to be bringing so much to this Oxford crew.
Yeah, he's just one of those really impressive athletes. In fact, I was looking back at his kind of previous racing record, and he's one of the only people that I know that has gone through and has raced at every international event that he's been eligible for. So he did all 3 years, got selected for the juniors every single year that he was eligible for it. Same for under 23s, and then to make the Olympic Games at such an age that Charlie Elwes is, he's a rising star, and certainly I think will be a linchpin of the Paris Games in a couple of years' time once he's completed this boat race project. Speaking of international experience, an Olympic silver medalist in the 7 seat for Oxford, Angus Groom. Now, Angus would usually associate with 2 blades rather than 1, Martin.
Yeah, you would. And, since he learnt to row at Walton Rowing Club down on the Thames, he's really been known as a sculler. But I think he's taken this chance to get to Oxford, taken this chance to get into sweet rowing, and injury meant he missed the Trial 8, but he's back now in the 7 seat and very, very strong. I mean, it's ridiculous, the strength of those 5, 6 and 7, the oarsmen for Oxford, Row Easley, Elwes and Groom.
Yeah, just that's just massive, isn't it? I think this is maybe going to be one of the most stacked Oxford crews that in memory, because again, in the stroke seat, Tobias Schroeder, another under 23 medalist, just completing that sort of rowing lineup before we get to Jack Totham in the Cox's seat. But Tobias Schroeder, you know, again, another really consistent blue, and Bowden choosing to put him in the stroke seat this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I hope we have got the camera following this, because it is. I think there is a frisson of excitement about this Oxford crew. Could this be one of the greatest Oxford crews of all time? I don't know. You sort of look back, maybe the 2005 Oxford crew with Hodgie and
Triggs, Hodgson, and
Reed,
Reed, yeah.
and some of the Americans, Mike Blomqvist in that crew, but. That you look back at the legendary Oxford crews, and this potentially has got the manpower to write itself a page in boat race history.
Yeah, I think it's very unusual to have this number of athletes that have come from an Olympic Games into the boat race. Yes, of course, in previous years we've had, rising Olympians moving into the boat race and moving through the stages, like your Constantine Loulidises and your Freddie Davidsons, but this is the first time we've had such a stacked crew straight from an Olympic Games competing in one side of the fence.
Yeah, so that race is due off in 40:47, so about another 8, 9, 10 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little look at the highlights from Fixtures racing of 2 weeks ago. If you missed it, you can catch up. Just a short 2-minute break, and then we'll be back ahead of the race between Oxford University and Leander.
So today we were against Leander, which is one of the top tier premier clubs.
We were pretty nervous for the conditions. I think as expected, everyone was.
We've had like pretty crazy windstorms all weekend, so I was expecting, the predicted 90 miles per hour, but I don't think it was that bad.
It's our first time side by side this season, so yeah, just to get the first run under our belt, first start sequence.
We were racing from the start line to Hammersmith Bridge, so just under 3k.
Usually in the British winter you just have lots of time trials, and that wouldn't really get us ready, so we get to race like good clubs and universities from around the country over sections of the boat race course.
I was coxing the Leander A crew today. I've recently come back from Tokyo, where I coxed the Paralympic 4 to a gold medal. The Oxford crew are they're a bit savage, actually. I think they're one to watch because in that first race we got up and then they just were there. Even if they come, and they start out down in a couple of weeks' time, I wouldn't write them off.
A lot of it is confidence, so we know that we can go through things like that and we can really trust our base rhythm and the strength of that.
I feel like we don't necessarily know our speed. I mean, we do pieces, we do the training, but it doesn't actually measure up against anyone else. So it was pretty exciting the first half of that race.
Off both pieces, we got jumped a little bit on the start, but we're able to sort of stay composed and we're able to walk through.
They've managed to win races rowing on their own terms. They've been able to row at a target rate and rhythm that they really set out to do. They certainly felt that they could keep going, that Hammersmith was almost a bit early for them.
Going forward, I think we can definitely clean it up a little.
Just keeping on, working on what we're working on.
Continuing to kind of finalise the lineup and seeing what works and finding boat speed.
Thanks to Row 360 for putting together those clips of the fixtures last year. It's great to hear the athletes and what they had to say. And that was the little appetizer, the taster for Oxford, the Blue Boat. Nominally the Blue Boat crews will be announced tomorrow. So we expect it will be pretty similar to the lineup today, going up against Leander A. And I guess the expectation is that the Oxford Blue Boat are just going to walk away from Leander. And I know that's probably not going to be how it is, but
I mean, I think if Felix Drinkle, who will sit at 6 in that Leander crew, will have anything to say about the matter, he's been in that position before. He knows how to approach a fixture, how to approach a boat race. So at least Leander have got some insight from a former Oxford president as to how to go about this, and he might have kind of incited some wisdom and some ways to approach it for Leander. A lot of those Leander athletes aren't hugely experienced and seasoned at this type of head-to-head battle racing and paddling, whereas Felix will have had that experience. But yeah, it certainly will hurt for someone like Drinkle if Oxford, given the strength that they're in right now. Drinkle was a 3-time blue, I believe, in his time there, former president, and to see it and to get beaten for all of those years, and now potentially see it go from strength to strength, it's going to be quite painful, I think, if the result is as we expect it to be.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if Drinkle will make the boat, actually, in terms of if he was there this year, because there's a real struggle to make that boat. 4 blues in the Oxford second boat this afternoon, showing the strength of that. We'll try and bring you the result of that race if we can. Lots of fixtures this afternoon. At the moment, we're waiting for the fixture between the Oxford Blue Boat nominally and the Leander A crew. When Leander raced Cambridge Henley, this was probably, I guess it was over a month ago now. The Cambridge boat bettered Leander, and that was a very good win for Cambridge over the pieces that they did. Oxford haven't had that much racing, as far as I know, Camilla. There was that postponed fixture nominally with the University of Washington crew, the Huskies, that were supposed to come over, that sort of was hanging in the balance, and then it never actually came off.
Yeah.
So,
they've done lots of domestic racing though, right? Like they although they missed the Fours Head,
they missed the Fours Head, didn't they? Yeah.
which is maybe one of the biggest stories that Oxford and Cambridge never missed the Fours Head. So for Oxford to miss the Fours Head was quite a big gap in their calendar, but they did make it up by then attending, I think it was Henley Fours and Eights that they raced at, or Wallingford on home water. So they've done a lot of domestic head racing, but it's just not the same, is it, Crossy? Like I just think the dynamic, the approach to racing a time trial, essentially, in a head race in something like Henley Fours and Eights, where your nearest competition is going to be the likes of Oxford Brookes, if they attend, and then it's a time trial format, so you're not there up alongside them. This is going to be a real test of their training character, and everything else. We've got, it looks like, here we go, Leander Club, Oxford University Men here paddling towards the bridge. Is that right? Yeah, Putney Bridge. So we should be almost ready to go with this one.
Well, we've got another 2 minutes. I don't think we've got our blip for the Oxford boat there following them, but this race due off at 40:47, which is just in a couple of minutes' time. And I do hope we have a camera in the launch following, Camilla. That was certainly one of the plan, but we are here from our camera on Thames Rowing Club. Leander have drawn the Middlesex station and Oxford have drawn the Surrey station. Oxford just in the shadow of the bridge. You can see the figures there.
And we do have to say, we really wish we could cover every single race with all the cameras and all the technology, but there are just so many fixtures going on the Tideway today, and we want to bring you the top, the sort of clashes for each of the main squads in the best quality we can, right? So the couple of races that we've picked out as our headline races today, we've got all the data, we've got the following cameras, but it's a lot of effort and it's a lot of hands on the ground. So a big thank you to everyone for putting this production together, for us even to get images of pretty much every race today, including all the reserve races, is pretty phenomenal.
So the start is going to be fairly imminent. Oxford just getting their boat straight. Umpire's flag is up. There they go. Leander, little pull round towards stroke side, I think, in the first stroke. Oxford blasting off. Wow, look at that start from Oxford. So look at the way the catches are going in, Camilla. It's really smacking it in, aren't they?
Yeah, really deliberate at the front end, isn't it? A really deliberate lift of hands. It's what you love to see, especially if it's going to be choppy conditions in a few weeks' time. It's going to be get those blades in, get the boat stable, because the boat is least stable when those blades are out of the water. So Oxford will know that, having had Sean Bowden coaching this squad for many a year. Get those blades in, get shot around the corner. But Leander sticking with them, and actually they look to have settled a lot earlier, Leander. And here's some side images, how fantastic. And even with this, it looks like Leander maybe just about the
40 strokes a minute. I thought Oxford looked really aggressive on the front end of that stroke, and typical Sean Bowden style, try and establish that bulletproof rhythm, which is going to take them over the course. Oxford now down at 35 strokes a minute. Leander still up at 38, and telling that Leander are really trying to establish the advantage of that Middlesex bend. Leander have got to be pleased with the first start phase of that race, the first minute of that race, haven't they?
Yeah, they've got to be really pleased. They'll know the strength and the measure of this Oxford crew, so they've got to try and get ahead. You know, they don't want to be on the back foot chasing them, but Oxford now just got to have confidence in their rhythm. It looks like Tobias Schroeder's hands are quite low in the boat moving forward. It's they're still behind. Their rating looks really relaxed, even at 37 strokes a minute. It certainly looks lower than Leander's, in fact, who are rating higher.
Yeah,
sorry, that are rating lower.
I think Oxford will be moving back through Leander, and Leander have got to build on the advantage of this bend, the Surrey bend, just to keep in the race, really, which is we expect going all the way around to Chiswick Steps. And you can see the camera, our side camera has not behaved itself as we would have hoped it will do, but we will get pictures from it, I'm sure. Shortly, you go in and out of signal on these cameras, and we will be bringing you side pictures of that race as soon as we could get it.
Yeah, we can still see the ratings and the splits underneath us here. So we can just keep an eye on it, keep tabs on it. But certainly Leander, out of the blocks really quickly there, running true to the form of their women. But I think the Oxford crew, they looked, I don't want to, as you say, be too disparaging of their technique, but they look quite short, Crossy. I don't know whether they will lengthen out. I know it is very characteristic of a Bowden squad, as you say, sharp, get the blades in. But I didn't know whether they were just rowing a little bit shorter than their length would allow them to, with really, long, strong athletes like Charlie Elwes in the 6th seat. They want to be getting all the advantage they can from someone like him. And here they go. They've just started to move away now.
Yeah, they've got the outside of that first bend towards Middlesex. Leander have done so well to hold the Oxford boat. Little clashing there. The umpire is warning Leander, I think, to move over towards Middlesex as Oxford begin to assert their dominance. You'd expect this Oxford crew to row right away. The water cutting up a little bit now.
Yeah, it's definitely gone a bit bumpier, hasn't it? I don't know whether that's the wash combined with the wind. We've had a lot of fixtures here, a lot of launches, ploughing up and down this stretch of water. But also it does seem like the wind is picking up, and these crews really close together. So lots of factors here for these athletes to be thinking about. Oxford look like they've now really gotten into a great rhythm around that finish, Crossy. I think they've got a really well-defined finish around these waves that they're rowing into.
Yeah, it looks great, doesn't it? Oxford's now into their rhythm. I wouldn't say this is the totally dominant race that we might be expecting with the firepower of the Oxford boat. Pretty much, I guess, the race between Leander and Cambridge would have been the distance towards Hammersmith Bridge. The water's really cutting up, isn't it? The crews have got to be clever. Leander still have a little bit of an overlap. Leander with the pink blades on the right of the picture, and Oxford's the blue boat with the dark blue blades on the left of your picture. And you can see with our graphic there, Oxford rating 35, Leander down at 33. Oxford now continuing to move away. The quicker boat speed, 126s, 125s, you can see per 500 metres on those splits. Leander Club at 127, 124. And now Oxford are beginning to show the sort of crew they are.
Yeah, and with this water chopping up, as I say, the finishes look really clean from Oxford. The catches look really sharp. The one thing I would say is maybe the blades are just burying a little bit deep on a few strokes for Oxford, which is going to be causing a bit of resistance. I don't know whether, again, that's just been the conditions in that last kind of 200 metres. And as we start to turn and see Hammersmith Bridge in the distance, you can see it there on our map, that might sort itself out a little bit as the conditions get a little bit calmer.
Yeah, certainly we'll look to see calmer conditions around, but Oxford now have about 3/4 of a length of clear water and are starting to move into the distance. Oxford still up at that 35 strokes a minute. Traditionally, the crew will have a big push or a big effort around about Harrods, try and really break contact with Leander Club, and Leander still at 33. So 2 pips lower in the rating, and just having a bit of a push themselves now. You can see the Leander boat speed is down to 123, 124, just slightly edging the Oxford men's current speed at 33 strokes a minute. This race has got another 3 minutes to run, and Oxford do look very strong out there. How do you think they're looking compared to Cambridge, Camilla?
Well, we'll get a direct comparison compared to Cambridge in just a few moments' time when we see Cambridge go up against Brookes, but difficult to say. I just think the environment was so different when Cambridge raced Leander at Henley. There's just so many fewer factors, right? Like straight course, condition, non-tidal. But I think Oxford look really dynamic. I think that's the best way to put it. They may not be the tidiest crew, but they look really dynamic, really sharp, and certainly with lots of confidence. I think with a few sort of magical tweaks from Sean Bowden in the next 4 weeks, this could be as we say, one of these legendary crews. And they've got the run of the water now. Look, they've just moved all the way over to that Middlesex bank. And yeah, just absolutely owning the tideway. And what confidence this must fill them with only 4 weeks to go.
Yeah, Wilf LeBrock, the Leander Cox, has taken his crew on the Surrey station to try and get the inside of the bend against Oxford, but it's not really got them any distance back on the dark blue boat as they edge round past the school boathouses, Latimer Upper School Boathouse. You can see the landing stage just there on the right of your picture. Oxford coming round towards Chiswick Ayot. And this has been quite a dominant performance, perhaps not the best off the start from the dark blue boat, but certainly getting into their rhythm around the outside of that Middlesex bends, going through Barn Elms and edging back on Leander.
You can really see the difference in styles here between Oxford and Leander. Oxford in the distance, I don't want to say they're rushing the slide, but they are just much shorter and sharper and more sat up around the front end. Leander's stroke rate is so much lower, 33 strokes a minute, the lowest we've seen all afternoon. And they are just a lot longer coming into the catch. Just 2 very different styles of approaching this. But it's definitely not hindering Oxford's boat speed, as you can see.
Yeah. The Oxford crew do look like a typical Sean Bowden crew, really aggressive on the front ends. That really struck by the way they took it off, and you can still see it now. Oxford down at 30. Well, no, I was going to say down at 32 strokes a minute, but I think they're winding up for the finish. Up at rate 40, really pulling everything out of their playbook for this race, aren't they? And that does look good from the Oxford boat. Just catches synced in. It must feel great to be in the middle of that boat. And some of those like Roman Reesley, Barnaby Dillars, Charlie Elwes, just showing what he's capable of in a boat in the 6th seat.
Yeah, the powerhouse is 4 or 5 athletes in the middle of that Oxford crew. Not that they aren't powerhouses in the stern pair or bow pair, as we've said. Liam Corrigan in the bow seat, going for the ride of his life, I'm sure, as the person closest to the finish line. That must be quite the experience for the American Olympian.
Yeah, really amazing experience up in the bow seat, and I do apologise if some of you've had problems with the microphone levels. We hope we've got that sorted out now. That's my microphone. I think I was a little bit in the background there, Camilla, but I guess that's what we came to see from that Oxford Blue Boat, a really dominant performance. And they looked like they had about 3 lengths or more on the Leander crew as they came down to Chiswick 8 in the finish of that piece.
Yeah, that they really established that probably, from 150, 200 meters into that piece. That's where they really went through the gears, decided that they needed to create the space in between themselves and Leander just had no response. I just thought that Leander did a great job of rowing their own race. Admittedly, they didn't get flustered. We saw that rating was really nice and low. I guess that was probably their race plan, and they just delivered what they'd set out to do. But I think in this period between this piece and the next piece, they're going to maybe have to think about changing that and seeing if it makes any impact, because to me it just seemed too low, and it allowed Oxford to cut the cord earlier rather than later.
Yeah, and the second piece they'll swap stations, and that'll be Oxford's advantage, and I wouldn't be looking forward to that if I was in the Leander boat. Do you know, it's kind of, I know the British squad are away in a viz at the moment, so it's not possible, but it would be great to see a Caversham-based 8 go up against, Oxford and go up against Cambridge, particularly, as the Blue Boats are so strong this year. Because I kind of think the standard of the Blue Boat is pretty similar to, what a British 8 would be doing at this time of year.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's very reminiscent of some of the great 8s we've seen that go to the heads, right? Like, I think that is probably the comparator for me, is seeing the ones that go to Head of the Charles or the ones that come and race here at Head of the River. That I would love to see an 8 like that come and go up against this. Well, sorry, I think this Oxford crew is probably much like the sort of caliber that you'd get within that sort of great 8 come, post Olympic, post international, come together and race an event like that. So yeah, I think it is probably pretty similar to what we'd see in this time in the cycle from an 8 basic Caversham.
Yeah, so I think this Oxford crew are going to be racing Oxford Brookes, I believe, in the next set of fixtures, maybe in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, we'll bring you at the end of this. We'll wrap up today's fixtures, but we'll also let you know what fixtures you've got to look forward to over the course of the next few weeks. And indeed, I can tell you that it's Sunday, the 20th of March. The Oxford men's Blue Boat will go up against Oxford Brookes. So we've got that in just 2 weeks' time. So we can also bring you some results from the previous pieces. We saw that race go off the start between the Oxford women and Oxford Brookes women, respectively, and that was a really close piece by all accounts. Off the start, it certainly seemed that way, and it stayed that way the whole way down the course, with Oxford just winning by an amazing 2 seats, Crossy, which is much closer than the Cambridge pieces against Oxford Brookes. Am I right in saying?
Yeah, definitely. I think that is much closer. And maybe Oxford Brookes have honed, what they're doing after having a couple more weeks in the boat together. So it might be a slightly faster Oxford Brookes boat, but that is definitely one up for the Cambridge women, who I think are, favourites for the women's boat race at this stage. But it's close enough to be, all up to play for. Definitely.
Yeah, and look, like we've said time and time again, the reason for these fixtures is that they have the time, less limited time, to go away and evaluate. They've got all of this great footage as well. The coaches are here on the embankment watching what's going on, not only with their own crews, but the opposition crews as well. So there's plenty of data, plenty of things to work on between now and the 3rd of April that we have to look forward to. So nothing is written off yet, certainly. Now, we did talk about earlier the we talked about the polls, didn't we? And how the poll got the Cambridge fixture spot on. The Cambridge women going up against Leander. They said Cambridge would win by over a length, which certainly was the case with the first piece. It was slightly, it was much closer in the second piece. But we also ran a poll for the fixture that we're about to see in a few moments' time, which is Cambridge University men versus the Brookes men, and that was much closer in terms of results. The leading vote was Brookes men to win by over a length with 34% of the vote, but in a close second, it was Cambridge University men to win by over a length with 26.8%. So you guys are about as indecisive as Martin and I are when it comes to what we're expecting from our sort of headline piece on the men's side today.
I think those guys that had Brookes winning must have thought that the Caversham guys are going to be in the Brookes boat, and we know it's not as strong as that. And again, you would expect the Cambridge University boat, the light blues, nominally are going to really take it to Oxford Brookes, and Brookes will be hanging on to Cambridge's coattails. That's kind of what you'd expect to see if we're going to have a close boat race. I think after Oxford doing that to Leander, I think now Cambridge have to do a similar job on the Brookes 8.
Yeah, I agree. I think that people voting to say that it would be Brookes by over one length certainly would have been expecting the likes of Buick Copley, Davidson, Sam Nunn, all of those names that have stepped up and, like you say, have gone on training camp in Aviz and are hopefully going to be making the senior squad this year. They're not part of this 8, so we'll be bringing you the lineups for that in a few moments' time. But the one thing I would say about Brookes, though, that always does, well, maybe not surprise me, but I think is always very impressive, is that as a unit, they come together really well, and despite not maybe having some of the individuals that make their boats go really quickly, the guys that were in that sort of Grand 8, Ladies 8 from Henley Royal last year, a lot of this crew will have been in their Temple 8 last year. As a unit, Brookes still seem to make the boat go fast, even if they don't have their superstar individuals. So I think that's something that we just need to be mindful of, is that never write Brookes off. Just never write them off, regardless of who's in the crew. If they're a well-trained, solid unit for Brookes, I think they're going to give Cambridge a good race. It might not be a win for Brookes, but I think it will be a good race.
So we're juggling introducing the Cambridge 8 and also potentially some more footage from Oxford versus Leander, but we're going to have a look at some introductions to the Cambridge crew to race Oxford Brookes.
Yeah, so we're going to take you through the Cambridge crew. In the bow seat, Luca Ferrero will start for Cambridge University Boat Club. It was in last year's PA4 at Henley Royal Regatta. Is one of these great up-and-coming athletes for Cambridge. He was definitely pulled out by Rob Baker as an up-and-coming superstar. And he will sit in the bow seat for this fixture against Oxford Brookes. In front of him, James Hunter is the next athlete up. James Hunter, 5th at the Rio Olympics in the men's lightweight coxless 4. A New Zealander who is studying for an MBA. So we'll come back to those lineups in just a moment. We thought we'd bring you racing rather than pictures. I certainly prefer live racing. So we'll pause that for just a moment, and it looks like we're going again with Oxford and Leander crossing.
Yeah, and Oxford are on the outside of the bend. So that looks interesting, doesn't it? That they've chosen the more difficult path of the two boats. This is the start. This is the start of Goldie versus Oxford Brookes. Goldie is the Cambridge reserve boat, and that race due off 15:07. So they're slightly early for it, and they're racing Oxford Brookes B crew. So the umpire gives a start, and it's going to be interesting, I guess. A little curtain raiser for the Cambridge race coming up later. Oxford Brookes really chunky, well together off the start. If anything, Cambridge look to have a slight lead at the moment as we come down. Can we give a name check for any of these crews?
Yeah, I think I've got the names of the crews going up for Oxford Brookes. So in the Brookes crew, we've got Cooper at bow, Iversdrow at 2, Nessum at 3, Hula at 4, Tognazzi at 5, Whitting at 6, Lassen at 7, Hayward stroking, and Bryce in the Cox's seat for Oxford Brookes. And then for Cambridge, I think we've got a crew lineup as well for that.
George Hawkswell, yeah, I can go for it, Camilla.
Go
George
for it.
Hawkswell in the bow seat, Cameron Spears at 2, Lasse Grimmer in the 3 seat, Thomas Lynch at 4, Reef Burica in the 5, Hugo Duward at 6, Seb Benrixie in the 7 seat, Henry Evans at stroke, and Ollie Boyne in the Cox's seat. And you can see that Goldie, the Cambridge Reserve boat, have about a quarter of a length lead over Leander as we go past Thames Rowing Club. And our camera there, we're not going to show you this race. We haven't got a camera on the boat, but we are showing it from a fixed camera, and it looks good news for Goldie in this early stage of the race.
Yeah, I think that is really good news for Goldie, considering the strength in the potential ISIS crew, and this is again potential Goldie crew, remember. But good news for them. We're cutting now. This is we're back with the second piece for Oxford versus Leander, and Oxford, my word, they look great from that side-on shot, Crossy.
They do, don't they? And that's the first time we've got a sense of how long they are out the front and how dynamic they are in the front end. Really, really imposing themselves up at rate 37, 116, over the ground, 117. That's rowing with the stream, maybe with a bit of a tailwind as well. Shows you how fast these 8s are moving. And boy, that's going to feel great up in the bow seat. Liam Corrigan, the American Olympian, up in the bows, is going to be having the time of his life riding shotgun in that position.
Yeah, Leander just, pestering them slightly, though. They've still got about a canvas overlap, and I think that's an improvement on the last piece, in fact, Crossy. They seem to be holding their speed for much, much longer, and running with Oxford, in fact, around this bend.
Yeah, they certainly are. And they know they need to keep in contact, because they know they're going to have, if they've got a little bit of an overlap and Oxford can't cut across into the Middlesex Bend station, then, that's going to give them something to hope for. And Jack Totham, the Oxford Cox, will be hoping that he can get that. They're just breaking contact there, and Totham will want to cross in front of Leander, and Leander will be desperate. That's just passing the bandstand. So they've got a little bit to go. And Oxford continue to edge out up at 37 strokes a minute. It looks a very impressive unit, doesn't it, Camilla?
Yeah, they seem to have sped up round the back turn, don't they, for this piece? They're really getting on to the next stroke, and I don't know if that's been a sort of slight change from that last piece. They seem to have a bit more time round the catch, still getting them those blades in nice and quick, but round the back turn, they're getting onto that next stroke very furiously.
So breaking contact with Leander, and Jack Totham will be able to move across and take the water on the inside of that bend at Barnes Bridge, the old handbrake turn that we talked about in the race previously, where we saw Cambridge University women race Leander A crew.
Yeah, and I'm sure if they do start to cut across, Matt Pinson, who's the umpire for this fixture, will just be keeping close eyes on whether Oxford have got enough room to be able to warrant that. Remember, they need to have a really sufficient amount of clear water to change their station. I think they've probably got it, Crossy, but it's still not an emphatic lead that they've got at this point.
No, it's not an emphatic lead. It's a better row from Leander Club. They've had the sort of to go round a little bit of the outside of that bend, but now as our eyes are glued to Oxford, they are just moving away stroke by stroke. You can see the difference in speed at the bottom of your picture. Oxford's going down to 117, 116, 150, 114, maybe pushing away from Barnes Bridge, and they've edged out now to over a length of clear water ahead of Leander Club, who are rating higher than they were on the first piece, Camilla, 35, 36 strokes a minute, but just can't quite match the Oxford speed.
Yeah, we did say they'd have to evaluate and try something different. 33 strokes a minute just is not high enough in this day and age of racing. Crews, especially 8s of this caliber, you have to be going over the course at least 35, 36 to even have a go at some of these top level athletes. And Leander seemed to have responded to that in this second piece. The gap is certainly closer, but you can see what we can see here, that Oxford just dominant in this second piece as well. well, still giving, Leander's still not giving them anything to worry about. And this is not going to be one of those close fixtures here this afternoon on the Tideway.
Well, look, pretty synced up. I was going to say just a little bit late to Pius Schroeder on that one stroke, the Oxford Stroke Man, but they do look pretty well synced up actually as a unit. And, they haven't been phased by not having that racing experience that we talked about. And this is going to give them such motivation, such heart that they've been able to do this to Leander. And I guess they're going to just edge out. You can see the 122 split, similar to Leander Club, who are pushing it for the finish now. And it'll be interesting to see if Oxford, rating up at 38 strokes a minute, are going to push those splits down to below 120 as they come up to the Chiswick Bridge finishing line.
Yeah, they're moving around this last and final bend, and we've already heard and seen the impact that the coxing has made, and it's just one final push now for Oxford. It will be Jack Totem in the cox's seat for the potential blue boat that will be announced tomorrow, saying final few strokes now. And he'll be looking back to Leander, spurring his crew on to say, look, a really good job, well done. And this will be, number of lengths of clear water, the final result of this one, Crossy.
Yeah, Oxford stopped and Leander just coming up. Sorry, we lost pictures of our race just as we came up to the finish line. And you could see the margin, though, that the Oxford Blue Boat had on Leander. It was quite a substantial margin, I would say, for that piece, despite Leander hanging on to their rivals at the start of that race. That was a pretty strong performance, pretty impressive by the Oxford Blue Boat. And we're going to see their rivals, Cambridge University. And I guess we're going to maybe see them with quite a different style. Maybe, it's going to be more, what would the expression be? To slip the blade in more at the front end, not be quite as, bam, like Oxford were on the catch.
Yeah, I think that Oxford are really chunky, right? It's like very defined, really definitive hands rising up at the catch, very sharp. Whereas you say Cambridge have just a bit more of a kind of silky smooth approach. So yeah, we'll see a real difference. But we cut from our run through of the Cambridge crew that will be facing Oxford Brookes to bring you that live for action. We're going to jump back in now to bring you those lineups. So we're joining this crew with George Finlayson, who sits at 3, an under 23 for Australia back in 2019. Studying at Peterhouse, Cambridge, and it's a very international field here in this Cambridge crew. Fantastic to see him sitting behind the great Simon Church, the Swiss international that was Olympic champion in the lightweight men's fours back in 2016 at the Rio Games. He's back now, training and studying at St Edmunds College and sitting in the 4 seat here for this fixture against Oxford Brookes. Now, the real meat on the bones of this Cambridge crew. Ollie Wynne-Griffith in the 5 seats, the Tokyo bronze medalist from the British 8. And a real force to be reckoned with, and he'll be rowing with one of his schoolmates who will announce in just a moment's time, the ex-Radley athlete. Plenty of Radley athletes treading this path, and the next one sat in front of him, Tom George, another Radley alumni. Great for that school to see so much success at both the Olympics. Tom George, of course, rowing with Ollie Wynne-Griffith at that Tokyo Games in the men's 8, taking home a bronze medal, but all the way from school days through to the boat race. Tom George and Ollie Wynne-Griffith as well, success at senior trials, and they'll be stuck in the middle of this crew behind James Bernard, the American under 23 athlete, making that huge step up into the goal from the Goldie crew into the blue boat this year. And in such a year like this, when we've got Olympic gold and bronze medalists, that's quite a big gear change for James Bernard to make that step up from Goldie to the blue boat. At stroke, Ollie Parish. We talked about how amazing Ollie Parish performed at Trial 8 in the stroke seat. So no surprise to see that Rob Baker's decided that is the place for him in this fixture. And I would not be surprised whatsoever if we see him announced at 10 a.m. tomorrow as the stroke of the blue boat for Cambridge University Boat Club. The former St Paul's athlete knows this stretch of the water like the back of his hand. And I think there is no one better to lead the rhythm down this piece for Cambridge. So Ollie Parish, the junior world champion, will stroke this crew on from his blue boat performance last year. And speaking of people that know Cambridge inside out, know the boat race inside out, Charlie Marcus with the steering wheel here for Cambridge University Boat Club in this fixture. The British Cox was the blue boat Cox last year. He's also raced in the Goldie crew as well back in 2019. And again, I think lots of experience there, knows how to get the best out of his crew. And the ex-Hamptonian Crossy, you'll be pleased to hear.
Yeah, ex-Hamptonian. There's a couple of them in the Cox's seats, and there's the lineup for Cambridge University. We do have the names of the Oxford Brookes crew, which we will give you at the start of the race. But we are expecting this final contest of the afternoon's series of fixtures between Cambridge and Oxford Brookes to go off at 15:49. I've got, is that right, Camilla? No, not 15:49. I do beg your pardon. 15:27. So in 10 minutes' time, I was looking at the second fixture that's due off at 15:49. So we're going to see two races between Cambridge and Oxford Brookes. Should we give a name check to the Oxford Brookes crew while we're here, Camilla?
Yeah, we'll take the Oxford Brookes crew from bow to Cox, and this crew was kept very well under wraps by Oxford Brookes until about an hour before our broadcast, so it's hot off the press. In the bow seat for Oxford Brookes, Odrin Donaghy, the former Enniskillen Boat Club athlete, sat in the bow seat. In front of him, Miles Devereaux, ex-Leander Club, the athlete who was in the Junior World squad back in 2019 on those championships that took place in Tokyo, in fact, where he was part of the junior men's quad. Great to see him now sweeping here at Oxford Brookes. Dries Baer in the three-seat, a new addition to the Oxford Brookes squad, a pretty rapid, also I'm informed, a pretty rapid Dutch athlete that clinches one of those middle four seats here for Oxford Brookes, which is no mean feat whatsoever. They must have a lot of confidence in his power. It's then Ben Hines, or the very tall 6'9" athlete that sits at 4 for Oxford Brookes. I mean, that must be some pretty huge length that he's going to deliver there to the bow three, Martin.
Big Ben.
Big Ben in the 4 seat. Big Ben Hines, 6'9". That is, we'll have to have a look out for him on the coverage. In front of Ben Hines, Jack Pryor sits at 5, the under-23 European gold medalists from last year's under-23 Europeans. He took that home from the men's 8. And another gold medalist from an 8, but this time from the under-23 World Championships, Matt Rowe, a key athlete for Oxford Brookes. He was part of that fantastic ladies plate 8 at Henley Royal Regatta for Oxford Brookes last year. He'll sit in the 6th seat. Stern pair next, Jake Winkham sits at 7. He was also at those under-23 European Championships along with Jack Pryor last year, but this time in the Cox 4, where he took home a bronze medal. And in front of him, Louis Nares sits at stroke, and it's a sort of temple-loaded stern here, because Louis Nares stroked Brooks's Temple 8 at Henley Royal Regatta last year, along with Will Denegry, who's the Cox, who also was in that Temple 8 for Oxford Brookes last year. So like I say, a few athletes, especially in some of those key seats, stroke Cox, that have raced for Brookes before, have raced for Brookes in quite important events for them, like the Temple at Henley Royal Regatta. I think we're going to see, a good unit here, Crossy. If Brookes or anything to go by.
Yeah, I could think they're going to be quite competitive early on in the race. I do expect Cambridge to dominate this race in the second stages as we go round, past the milepost down to Hammersmith Bridge. And I would expect to see, I think after that Oxford race, an Oxford's victory of, by at least the length of Clearwater over Oxford Brookes. I think they need to deliver that, give themselves, a bit of motivation and a bit of fillip, because, Oxford have laid down the gauntlet in their series of races against Leander, and now it's for the Cambridge men to do the same against Oxford Brookes. And you have to say, with athletes like Ollie Wynne-Griffith and Tom George, the two Brits at 5 and 6, coming into this race off the back of a pairs trial win at the British 5K trials, the fastest pair in that event, that it's really set up. I'm really interested to see Simon Church in the 4 seat. He was in 6 in the Trial 8s, the Trial 8 boat that won, and moved back to 4. Really interesting, I think, to see him in the 6th seat, the former lightweight, and another former lightweight, James Hunter. It's the first time we've had a look at the Kiwi who rode in a pair. He actually, the former lightweight, rode in a pair with Tom Murray in 2017 Worlds, I think, in Sarasota. And the MBA student just slotted into that boat in the 2 seat.
And he was out for trial 8s for some reason, Chrissy.
He was.
Is that right? Because we were expecting him and thought that he might be quite a good candidate to sit in the stern for one of the trial 8s. And then I think it was either injury or illness that counted him out of that particular event.
Yeah, I think it was. And we're not sure quite why, but it's great to see James Hunter back in the boat. We're looking at the Cambridge boat there. That's the back of Charlie Marcus, the former Hamptonian. And they are downstream of Putney Bridge and going through their warm-up procedure. There is probably about 4 minutes or so to the start race. There are the light blues just waiting to drift down past Putney Railway Bridge through to Putney Bridge, where the boat race start is almost immediately after Putney Bridge, and just getting rid of their kit.
Yeah, a few final words from Rob Baker, perhaps, as well, who could be in that launch. Obviously, can't see from the footage too clearly, but any, sort of final sentiments that you'd be expecting Rob Baker to say, Crossy?
Well, it's an interesting one. I would have, for preference, I think, in terms of, you say what you're going to expect from the crew, and then you leave your crew to get on with it. You don't put too much input. I kind of think maybe he's there collecting pieces of kit or something, that they've maybe gone out with and they don't want to use for the race. So
maybe we've got that wrong, Chris, because that looks like Cambridge to me over there. So sorry if we have got that wrong.
Yeah,
but
that's Cambridge over
like
there.
Light blue tops in the previous shot, but maybe it was Oxford Brookes.
I mean, I don't know what you think, Camilla, but once you've done your bit, so that might have been Henry Balash Webb in that launch.
Yeah, that's true. Could have been Henry, indeed. And now, much more familiar sight of the sort of day glow luminescent tops of Oxford Brookes. They always opt for those. The men in the yellow sort of luminescent base layer. The women were sporting a sort of orange luminescent layer. Makes them very easy to spot and for us to compare how they're getting on in the crew.
Looks like Brookes are on Surrey by the way those two crews were positioned just below Putney Railway Bridge, and Cambridge on Middlesex.
That would make for a really interesting first piece, I guess, because I think the majority of, if it is this way round, I think the majority of the first pieces, it's been the potential blue boat crew starting on Surrey, if I remember rightly from this morning's racing.
This afternoon's racing, certainly. And Cambridge just going round. Both crews will set themselves up and paddle down below Putney Bridge, where they will stop rowing, easy, and nice paddle off by Cambridge there.
A long way to Surrey.
I'm really intrigued as to look, how the front ends might be similar or different between the Cambridge Blue Boat and the Oxford Blue Boat. Look at the difference in style. I think Oxford Brookes are always quite snappy on the front end, the way they do their training and racing. They have quite an aggressive front end, and those big fat blades that Oxford Brookes use, fat smoothies.
Yeah, I think that I think that Oxford Brookes are always so strong, and their leg drive, if they can get it together, which is always a characteristic of a Brookes crew, it can really outpower what on paper can be stronger crews, right? I think Brookes' technical model, the fact they get every athlete to row together, they get every athlete rowing in the same sort of pattern, technically means that any athlete can sit in any crew, and it's the Brookes model and the Brookes way of rowing, and units make boats go fast.
Yeah.
If you're rowing the same way as somebody else in front of you, it doesn't matter how big their ergo is in the other crew, it doesn't matter how strong they are, your unit's going to go much faster. So I do really believe that Brookes have a model that works really well for this type of fixture.
So Charlie Marcus, the light blue cock, said, "This is where I'm going," and Leander A, the Brookes Cox, is trying to say, look, I want this water too. So I think the umpire is going to have a little bit of sorting out to do at the start, because the two crews are very close together, which will make for an interesting first few 100 metres of this contest. We're shortly to go off. Race time is due off now, so they're on the start. Oxford Brookes closest to us on the Surrey station from this camera shot from the side, and Cambridge University on the left of your picture in the light blues. You know that by now, don't you?
And it's Sarah Winklis we've got umpiring this fixture, so let's see if she'll have a lot of work to do to try and keep these crews apart. We're moments away from the start here. Cambridge University versus Oxford Brookes.
There's the flag, and the two crews are off, and nice comfortable on the start. Cambridge look quicker on at the front end, but not as not as direct, do they?
No, Oxford Brookes have absolutely smashed it out of the start there. I think they've certainly got the better of Cambridge in those first few strokes. And I did say Sarah Winklis might have a lot of work to do. She's already got her flag pointing towards the Surrey station for Oxford Brookes to move over. And wow, this is properly close.
Oh, sensational. Look at that. That is sensational race at the start of this race. Oxford Brookes, we knew the Coxes were up to something. Charlie Marcus won't move the former Hamptonian Cox, but it's disrupted the rhythm of his crew. And Will Dingley, the Oxford Brookes Cox, has had to move across to Surrey. I'd expect Cambridge to start to move through at this point in the race, Camilla.
Yeah, they will. And look at the rhythm here being set by Ollie Parish in the stroke seat. We did say it's going to look very different to the Oxford crew we saw earlier, and I think that's apparent even from these first few strokes. There's just, it's a lot less sharp, isn't it? There's no kind of determining start or end of the stroke. It's very fluid. It does mean that off the start, yes, perhaps not quite as strong, and they did go a canvas down, but certainly through the latter stages of this race, it's going to see them coming back. But Brookes holding on here, half a canvas still to Oxford Brookes.
I think Cambridge had a little lead in that race, and I think Brookes have pulled back through, which is going to be fantastic for the Oxford Brookes student crew. And this is going to be on the outside of their bend. So Cambridge have got to be, I don't know if they're holding something back or if they just haven't found such a great rhythm at the moment, or it's that clash that's kind of put them off. But at the moment, it's first round to Oxford Brookes.
Yeah, certainly. And it does seem that Cambridge are coming back centimetre by centimetre, inch by inch on the far side. You can see that bow ball just starting to make an appearance through Oxford Brookes. But you've got to remember, you're right, Crossy, it's the inside of Cambridge's Bend, round past Fulham Football Club. You can see on our map there, and soon the advantage will turn to Oxford Brookes. So if Brookes can hang on, this is certainly not over yet. Cambridge, that really nice, loose, long rhythm. Perhaps Luca Ferreira in the bow seat there, just leaning a little bit too far, going beyond the sort of catch of his stroke, Crossy, I think, searching for that extra length.
Yeah, he's really going out for length, the bowman, Luca Ferrero, up there, the former Latimer upper school boy. Cambridge now moving out, taking advantage on their bend. And certainly, I think, for the point of this race and for the sort of give a fillip to the light blue boat, they need to keep on moving right out from this Oxford Brookes boat. And maybe Brookes have laid it down early on, been very aggressive, Camilla, and they're going to start to struggle. Cambridge at 33, Oxford at this time in the race were up at 35. Oxford Brookes down at 33, which was the same as Leander Club. So, yeah, I think the Oxford Blue Boat was maybe slightly more aggressive at this stage of the race than we're seeing from Cambridge.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think there's not been a real sort of shift. There's not been a call for any specific move. They've just let what happens. But the bow ball stuck pretty firmly to George Finlayson in the 3-seat for Cambridge. Oxford Brookes' bow ball has just stapled itself there and not letting it go any further. So I'm sure George Finlayson will be able to sort of feel that out of the sort of stroke side of the boat, see Oxford Brookes' bow ball just lingering, just staying there. And if they stay there, Crossy, that's the most important thing. I'm sure that's what Will Denegri of Oxford Brookes, who's, as I say, got the reins for Brookes, he'll be saying just stick on Cambridge. If we can stick with them, we're going faster because they've got the advantage.
And I reckon, half a length on the Middlesex bend, that's job done for Oxford Brookes because they can stick with Cambridge University. Now you can see how close the two crews are. And Brookes will think, right, it's our bend on Surrey now. And a really impressive performance from Oxford Brookes. And Cambridge have got a lot of work to do. I'm not sure if they've got into the kind of rhythm that they want. They're down at 33. Maybe, I would have expected them to be at 34, 35, a little bit more sharp, a bit more aggressive. Certainly the Oxford boat looked more match ready than the Cambridge boat, I think, at this stage of the race.
Look at this, Crossy. I think Oxford Brookes flying now, eating back with every single stroke. And through these poor conditions, if you look at the blade work, look at the crew form, Brookes just look like they're gliding over the top of this bit of bumpy water, whereas Cambridge are getting their blades caught. They're, just a little bit kind of washy and just a lot of water coming off the blades as they take them out at the back end. Look.
More clashes coming there between the Oxford Brookes and Cambridge boat, and Brookes just trying to go round and take the advantage on that Surrey bend. And the Cambridge coxswain president, Charlie Marcus, well, it's Brookes taking the lead. Brookes have gone into the lead, Camilla.
Oh, well, look at Brookes pushing Cambridge out here into the dead water. This is really bold here from Denegri of Oxford Brookes. He's saying, look, if you want to come through us, you've got to go round us. And he's pushing as far out as he can, look, and that's giving them an advantage. This is hugely impressive considering this is, as we said, mostly athletes from Brookes that have been left after the top ones have stepped up, and almost 3/4 of a length now if you look at the blade plate, where the blades are.
Yeah, almost 3/4 of a length. Was a sensational row by Oxford Brookes University against the might of the light blues. Cambridge University on the right of your picture. Oxford Brookes just edging out. You can see the splits there, 123s. Cambridge down at 116, 118, but they're not moving back at the moment on that stroke meter. And they've got to do something special if they're going to get into this race and get their bows in front by the finish line, which is round about Chiswick Steps along the Chiswick Gate.
I think that was just a crab there, actually, for one of the bowsiders in the Brookes crew. Disaster. I think they just clipped one of Cambridge's blades, but the picture's just gone. We lose signal on some of the patches of the of this bit of water, and we'll see how that's impacted Brookes. I don't think it has too much. They've recovered well, but that could have almost been a disaster there.
Nice compact crew, this Brookes unit, aren't they? They were very aggressive off the start and held Cambridge around that Middlesex bend, and now they've looked to be turning that great big Surrey bend to their advantage. They're more aggressive at 34 to 35, and this is a real test for Cambridge. Cambridge will look at this and say, it's great we had a test and we learned a lot from this row. I guess one of the things they'll need to learn is they need to be a little more pacey and more aggressive rather than down at 33. They need to have the same length at 35 strokes a minute. And
I just think that the Brookes drive is a lot more deliberate. You know, I just think that swing, utilizing the hip swing, it's all very together. The drive is very together. I think that's what's giving Brookes the advantage here. You know, Cambridge, they're a really strong crew, but it just doesn't look very deliberate, the drive. I don't know how better to put it, Crossy, but Brookes are just really well synced and timed and drive together really well.
I think Cambridge might be slightly moving back towards Oxford Brookes on the outside of this bend. Brookes maybe put a lot in, both crews rating 34 strokes a minute. Cambridge will know. There we see from the side shot. Well, Cambridge have got a little bit of work to do if they want to get back. It'll mean so much to them to get their bows in front in this race, but I'm not sure that Brookes are going to let them. We know all about the aggressivity of the Brookes racing style. We know how much they train and race against each other. They'll be used to this, and they won't want to let Cambridge back in. They'll shut the door on Cambridge, and I take Brookes to win this race.
Yeah, I mean, just like I said before this fixture even started, never write a Brookes crew off, because the amount of determination that's instilled from top to bottom, from their top 8 all the way through to, you know, the 6, 7, 8 eights they yield at the university championships in May. They are all just so gutsy, and they'll do anything to put a Brookes bow ball in front, and that's exactly what's happened here. What a huge overhaul for Brookes in this first piece.
Yeah, and they're moving out using the inside of that Surrey bend. They're moving out on their rivals today from Cambridge, the light blue boat. You can see the Oxford Brookes, the red dot just ahead there. Cambridge obviously got overlap, but they were hoping for rather more margin. And Oxford Brookes moving out to what looks to be 2/3 of a length, maybe edging out to 3/4. Oxford Brookes up at 40, Cambridge still at 36. It almost looks that, you know, they're a little heavy. They're not particularly racy as we come down to the last few strokes of this race.
Yeah, I think, you know, they look very the slide looks like they're sort of floating up the slide. They're giving it lots of time. They look very clean, you know, sort of on the recovery phase, but it just doesn't look racy. You're right, Chrissy. When you put them side by side with Oxford Brookes, who, you know, they just smash the legs. They smash the sort of hip opening up. They're just really punchy. Race every stroke as if it's their last, and Cambridge now, you know, starting to come back.
Cambridge coming back finally, but it's too late. 38 strokes a minute in the end. They came to rating there, but Oxford Brookes exhausted as well they might be. But what a fantastic contest that was.
That was amazing. That was everything that you wanted from a fixture. A bit of clashing, a little bit of choppy water, sort of both sides leading at some point in the race, a row back through. That will have given Cambridge, I know it's not the result they would have wanted, but it will give Cambridge a lot of information about how they react in certain situations, Martin.
Yeah, it would have been. You generally, you know, I know we're looking back at the dark blue fixture, but Oxford going over at 35 strokes a minute, they look really dynamic. They look really racy. They look really sharp. Cambridge have had that race against Leander that they managed to better them. But against the Oxford Brookes crews, they got flustered, I think, by that clash. They maybe didn't quite get into the rhythm as soon as they might have done. And then they kind of held that 33, where really you're kind of thinking, what's this boat going to look like at 34, 34 and a half, maybe 35? And
I think you can get away with, you know, 33 over the course at trial eights or in January. You know, I think you can get away with the boat has to move for you, right? That's what you're taught when you're learning to row and you're starting to step up to higher and higher level competitions, is you need to let the boat do the work for you, and you can only do those higher ratings if it warrants it, right? Like, you need to make sure that the boat is moving and the rate matches it, rather than creating the rating and hope the boat comes with you. Now, at 33 strokes a minute, you can get away with that in January, because, you know, start low rating, build the speed, and then you can warrant stepping up to that 35, 36 that Oxford were at. But to still be at 33 as your race pace 4 weeks out from race day, when you can see what Oxford are doing now and they're only going to be trying to find extra speed. I don't know. I just feel like they're maybe a little bit behind pace and behind the curve for where they need to be if they're going to be competitive on race day.
Yeah, so I think, has Cambridge got one more race left after this against Neerhouse, the Dutch students? Is that right? Would I have that?
Yeah, so Cambridge, Monday the 21st of March will be their final fixture, and that will be the provisional Blue Boat lineup that will go up against the Dutch under-23s. And Oxford men will face Oxford Brookes the day before, so that we'll see how they'll fare on Sunday the 20th of March. And of course, both Cambridge women and Oxford women have also got their own sort of final fixtures. We'll go through what's to look forward to at the end of our coverage once we've seen this second piece from Cambridge and Oxford Brookes. But Martin, we talked a lot about what the key learnings are in between pieces. And I think for each of the ones we've commentated on so far, there's been one really clear, the start needs to improve, or you need to make sure that you don't get flustered at this particular point. I feel like Cambridge had a lot of things there that were maybe red flags. Which ones do they pick to improve on now?
Yeah, for me, I think they've got to look like they're more aggressive in terms of racing. I don't think you can go over the boat race course at 33 strokes a minute and win against a crew as good as Oxford. You just can't. So I think you've got to be more aggressive in that first phase of the race. And the transition, I mean, I don't know what they were going off the start. I can't quite remember the rates, but they're obviously going 40 plus off the start. I think that transition has got to extend through, hopefully, kind of without clashes. It's going to be very interesting to see in terms of leadership in that boat. There's a lot of experience. Olympic champion Simon Shurich in the 4-seat, the Swiss. Ollie Wynne-Griffith, he's a leader of men, and Tom George in 6-seat will have a lot to say. Ollie Parish in the stroke seat, obviously, one of his key sort of strengths is he knows what a good rhythm feels like. I'm not sure he got it right in that particular race, but whether the coach comes in, Rob Baker, and says, right, we need to try a different approach for this contest. It's clearly not giving us what we want. I don't see any point in them just going over to row at 33 in this race. I think, we've tried that. Let's just try and be a little bit more aggressive with the rating. Let's try and shake our opposition up, and let's try and, be in front of them at the end of the second piece.
Yeah, I think we saw Leander respond in that last piece against Oxford in the similar fashion, right? Like they did that first piece at 33, and I think it dawned on them that it's just not enough. So they made the bold choice to change their race strategy, up the rating by a couple of pips on the stroke rate. And I think it's quite a bold call to make, though. If you've done all of your training at rate 33 and you've come here with that plan to stick to your race plan in mind, it's quite a bold call to change something like the rating.
Yeah, you're right.
This last minute, yeah,
you're right, and and the maxim goes, you need to, be in your boat and not think about the other crew. I think there are certain sort of measures in terms of rating. I think the head of the river race that's coming up, I have in mind 34, that you want to be going over at 34. 33 is the absolute minimum. This is not, this was shorter than the head of the river race. It was a head-to-head contest, and 33 wasn't delivering what they wanted. So there are only so many chances. You've got to say these guys have got so much training behind them that you've got to say someone like Ollie Parish in the strokes, that they should have the flexibility to switch it up just that one pip and say, look, let's try this for the second piece. We now know they've got all the information for the first piece. Let's try something different for the second piece. I'd be looking for a bit of leadership in the middle of that boat to say, we're going to be more aggressive in terms of rating. They put it up to 38 at the end, but they did wait a long time to get the rating that high.
Yeah, but it shows that they can do it, right? They did come right back at Brookes when they put the rating up. Of course, I'm sure that the power came with that in order to generate that rating. But it shows they can do it. It's then just whether they've got the endurance and, like you say, the flexibility to suddenly, one extra stroke per minute over what will be a 17, 18, 19-minute race. It's quite a lot. If you've not trained for that, that's
Yeah.
quite a lot to expect.
What I'm thinking now is, this race is going to be 6 minutes from Chiswick Steps or roundabout Chiswick Steps round to the boat race finish. It's like 6, maybe 6.5 minutes. So you can do that for that distance, and you can see how the boat feels. The thing is, if I think they've got to be racing at 34. They won't be racing at 33 in the boat race. I can guarantee Cambridge will not go over at 33 in the boat race. They're just, if the adrenaline and everything else, brings it up on the day, they will be higher than that.
Yeah, and now maybe they've shaken off the nerves of that first piece. They've got they've had their first blade clash. They have, gone through a little bit of, rhythm disruption, whatever it is. This second piece, actually, you have the ability to not be worrying about those things now. It's like when you get nervous before any race and then it goes away once you've taken the first stroke. Like thinking about, what do I do if my blade clashes with someone else? What do I do if we're not up after the first 10 strokes? Like they've done all of that now. They know what that feels like. So this second piece, almost you throw all those nerves behind you for any one of those scenarios and you just go, okay, I know what that feels like now. Let's go and attack it, like you say. Let's see what this feels like to be a little bit more aggressive. And that might not have been their plan coming into today, right?
Yeah.
But you got to adapt.
It's interesting to see what Brookes will do, of course. I mean, you've got to say that being a temple 8 from Brookes, as we see the Cambridge 8 coming down perhaps towards the start. The Oxford Brookes 8 still in the bank, but Brookes were exhausted after that fantastic performance that they put out against the light blue boat. Oxford Brookes have got this history of being the fastest university, and they'll be saying, we still are the fastest university in terms of the races that they've had with both Oxford and Cambridge. So I think the Brookes strategy for this race is going to be, to be racing, to be aggressive, to be dynamic, just like they were in that first piece, and to really put pressure on Cambridge. I think, if Cambridge have, if they've got the same stations, I think, which they probably will have by the looks of things. I think, is that Brookes the Brookes paddling up? Will they turn around and?
Yeah, looks like it.
Cambridge sat ready on the start. The projected start time is in a minute. They're not going to start within a minute because Brookes have got to turn round.
Brookes will make them wait, Crossy. Brookes will take their time, do whatever is best for them in their race plan, and I think they'll keep Cambridge waiting. More of a psychological thing more than anything, but they will keep Cambridge waiting.
So I wonder what Rob Baker has said to his crew. I wonder what the crew's been saying to themselves around about this particular contest coming up, which is from Chiswick Steps to the boat race finish, around about 6.5 minutes. The record to Chiswick Steps is 9:56, and the record to the finish is 16:19. So that is around about 7 minutes or so, isn't it? This particular piece. Oxford Brookes are turning. I thought Oxford Brookes were going to paddle off for a minute and just say,
"We're done. Thanks.
Just
Thanks very much."
Sat there, we'll take that result.
I mean, it would have taken a lot for Brookes to push on that far, but I think both crews have got a huge amount of endurance. The number of winter miles that not only Cambridge will have done, but Brookes will have done as well, it is phenomenal. And to now be facing another very intense 6-7 minute piece, you'd think, Brookes after that effort must be lagging, but they won't be. You know, they'll be ready to go again. They do this kind of training on the stretch. Brookes, obviously, if you don't know already, train on the same stretch that Oxford University do over in Wallingford, and they're week in, week out, they're doing this kind of battle paddling, 20-minute pieces side by side, to build that endurance base. So they're really well equipped and well prepared to go again and give a full monumental effort for the last few strokes of this fixture.
Cambridge has just been sat there for quite a while, and they're going to be past the start line, aren't they, for the moment? And a few looks round to see where the Brookes crews are. And Brookes have kept them waiting. Start time was due to be 2 minutes ago. And the camera pans back, and there are the Oxford Brookes crew, flushed with success from that first piece. If you are just joining us, this is a Loudon presentation of the fixture series of the Gemini 2022 boat race. And the Brookes 8 there, we're looking at Lewis Nares in the stroke seat, and the Brookes Cox, Will Dengari, who steered a blinder, I think, in that race. Well done, Will.
Yeah, I mean, it was aggressive. Don't get us wrong, right? Will Dengari did a really good job of sticking to his line when things were getting tough. Blades were overlapping by a substantial amount, and for a Cox that, you know, isn't training to be a boat race Cox, pretty good, pretty aggressive, and what we like to see. But I'm sure Sarah Winkless was having a little bit of a, little bit to think about there.
So is this piece going to be off a standing start or on the run, is what I want to know. There's Brookes coming up to, we're almost on to Chiswick Steps, and the crews aren't level, as you can see. So Cambridge have got the advantage of that station. They have had to wait a long time. Charlie Marcus with his hand up, the Cambridge Cox. This looks like it's from a standing start, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Tom George there, looking to his feet in the 6th seat. A lot to think about, a lot to assess. What can that middle pairing of George and Wyn Griffith do to heave this crew to the position they need to be in? Because there's a lot on their shoulders as Olympic bronze medalists in this boat class.
There's the umpire waiting for instructions. Bowman, Luca Ferraro just touching it up. They're trying to get Oxford Brookes have a little bit of a lead at the moment, so Cambridge just touching it up, trying to get level as we go past that. Cambridge still a little bit down, aren't they?
Yeah, both Coxes still not happy. It's so difficult, though, to align with no stake boats. But Sarah Winkless looks happy, and we're underway.
I think Brookes had a little bit of a lead off the start there, didn't they? And,
Oh, look at this from Cambridge, Crossy. That is a huge improvement. Look at that.
They have really smacked that off, haven't they? Look at that. And it'd be interesting if we get our graphics to see what Cambridge are actually rating, that they've got a 1 or 2 man lead. Brookes had the lead off the start. Cambridge up at 45 strokes a minute, dropping down to 42. Brookes right in there, but Cambridge are going to be really accelerated round the outside of this bend. Brookes have the advantage at the moment. This looks like a different crew, Camilla.
Look how upright they are at the catch compared to that last piece. I think that's, Ollie Parish has just changed the style completely. Look at the lever. You can see that sort of swing, which is exactly, they're throwing Brookes' own game back at them, right? They've really got that swing together. The shoulders are opening together. This is a different crew. It's like they're doing jump squats off the start.
It completely is. I wonder what this is going to take out. They're still at 39, Cambridge. Brookes at 38. And this is really, we're going to look at the endurance of the light blues now. They're going out to almost a length. Ollie Parish taking it away. They haven't had the clash that maybe put them off their rhythm in the first piece, where Brookes' blades and Cambridge blades clash, but Cambridge really taking it out now. And, these guys know how to rate high. They know how to rate well. People like James Hunter and Simon Shurick in the 2 and the 4 seat of Cambridge but they're not quite got the length yet, but it's the inside of their bend, and they are still at 37, Camilla. What did we say about the rating during our, chat between the two pieces?
Yeah, they've really taken that on board. They're slowly drifting down to 36. You can see a little bit more length being created by Parrish in that last quarter of the slide run. But don't they look great from this front-on shot? I was just thinking how solid their kind of finish stature is as they come round the turn. This looks fantastic, Crossy. I'm really pleased that this higher rating's working out for them and they're not chasing it. It looks like they're really relaxed.
I wonder whether that's come from the crew or whether it's come from Rob Baker.
Look at Brookes' rating here, though, Crossy. They're coming up to try and match here, to try and close the gap.
They are. Cambridge up at 36. A reminder, in the first piece, Cambridge were happy or not happy at 33 strokes a minute. Now they are up at 36, passing that green buoy by the bandstand, coming up to Barnes Bridge. And where are Oxford Brookes? They're not in the picture. Cambridge moved out to the middle of the river, and Woldingari, the Brookes Cox, has moved inside of Cambridge, but Cambridge are out and gone.
And look at those catches as well. I think we were saying that was the determining factor for the Oxford crew in their piece against Leander, was how sharp they were around the front end. And Cambridge of just mirroring that here around this bend. They're going to try and cut Brookes off. They've already got clear water, and Brookes are not used to being in this position of having to chase from behind.
No, I think Brookes put so much into that first piece, and they tried to be aggressive. They were aggressive in the start of the piece, but you just saw a completely different Cambridge crew start that second piece to the crew that started the first piece. They're not going to have that luxury in the boat race. But we're looking at Oxford Brookes, the trailing crew at the moment, go through Barnes Bridge. You can see there's about 2/3 of a length of clear water between them and Cambridge. And I think Cambridge will want to, play with this rate at 35, move out. They put a lot of work into the first part of this race, but the piece isn't finished. They've still got about 2.5, 2 3/4 minutes at this point in the race to go to the finish line, and they will want to edge out more than their rivals from Oxford Brookes.
I think Cambridge in a little bit of danger of looking like their previous piece here. They seem to have just taken their foot off the gas a little bit. You can see the rate creeping down now, 34 strokes a minute. I mean, they've obviously got the water to play with over and above Oxford Brookes because they had that sensational start. I just think Cambridge need to, if they found something that works, see if they can hold it. They've sort of lost that dynamism from the drive as the rates come down. They're not quite as springy, and it looks beautiful, don't get me wrong. It looks fantastic now they're out in front, but just don't want to see them lose that urgency through the water.
Brookes still up at 37 strokes a minute, still aggressive with it, still fighting for it. They've not given up at all, as you'd expect from a Brookes crew, but the splits down at 122, 120, not quite at the 117, 116, 119 the Cambridge crew. Would you say Brookes are closing on Cambridge a little bit there, Camilla?
Yeah, I think a little. I think Brookes are closing a little. I've not seen much of a turn here from the Cambridge Cox. I don't know whether you would agree. Not much turning around and measuring where Brookes are. Head to the boat. They're in their own race, but usually you even see it on race day, right? A little bit of a look over the shoulder at the trailing crew just to get a measure of where they're at. And I don't seem to have seen that yet.
No, this is really important for both crews. Brookes might be trying to fight their way back to Cambridge. They're still slower on the 500 metre splits. You can see that at the bottom of the screen. Cambridge now coming up to the finish line, which is just before Chiswick Bridge. You can see the Tideway Scullers Club there. In terms of the graphic, Brookes, I don't think they've made too much back on Cambridge. That's probably something like a length and a bit of clear water that Cambridge have on Brookes. Round 1 to Brookes, round 2 definitely to Cambridge in this race as they approach the boat race finish. And this is a completely different beast to the Cambridge crew that we saw in the first piece. Frankly struggle against Oxford Brookes, and this is much more like the kind of result that we would expect.
Yeah, and you can see them winding back up through the ratings now, 37 strokes a minute. for Cambridge over the line, and Brookes shortening right up to 43 to get themselves as close to Cambridge as possible, but just not close enough in this second piece.
Thumbs up from Charlie Marcus there. I mean, the mood in that boat is going to be so different, I think. They've kind of discovered something. They've kind of discovered what they need to race at, and that's all thanks to Brookes. And Brookes taught them that lesson, I think, in the first part of that race.
And learning. That just goes to show you one piece is enough for you to evaluate, find out what went well, what didn't go well. And I'd be really interested to hear what it was that either Rob Baker or even Charlie Marcus in the Cox's seat said to that crew in between those two pieces that caused that change. Because I think there's a danger of giving too much information and overloading the crew and saying, oh, well, we need to think about this, and this, because that's where Brookes bettered us. Or one change, one sentence, one word. The crew will have seen the position that they were in that first piece from Cambridge. And actually, I'd be really interested to know what the key phrase was that was said to cause that change.
I mean, potentially in terms of crew leadership, you expect that it might lie in the middle of that boat with Wyn Griffith or George, the two Brits out of the 8 in Tokyo. Ollie Parish in the stroke seat, or Charlie Marcus, the president, in the Cox's seat. I kind of think, it's up for those two Brits to lay it down in the middle. You've kind of got under or around the 540 on the 2K ergo score. There's a lot on those two guys. They won the pairs trials. How much they turned up to the race in that first contest.
But the whole boat, you're only as strong as your weakest athlete in that boat, right? In both crews that will line up, all the crews that line up on boat race day, you're only as strong as your weakest athlete. And I think that everyone's got to do their job to allow people like Tom George to put down his 539 ergo in the 6th seat. Bow pair have got to do their bit of getting on it. Stroke pair have got to do, stern pair have got to do their job of being rhythmical, transferring that rhythm down to the middle forward to be able to lay down that power. So although we're saying, yes, there's a lot on those guys in the middle, Ollie and Tom, it's a whole crew effort, right? And Charlie Marcus needs to say the right things to make sure that crew responds well and does that. So, whatever happened in that second piece, a whole crew effort to make sure that everyone could do their jobs correctly. It certainly happened. And I'm going to, do a full 180 and say what I'd said before about Oxford looking clear favourites now. If we get a Cambridge crew that turns up on the 3rd of April that looks like that, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting today. And in terms of what we've seen, I guess the Cambridge women might be marginally the favourites ahead of Oxford in terms of the results we saw and the type of contest that they had. Oxford just winning that. I mean, the Oxford women will take away the fact that they did finish with the bows in front of the Oxford Brookes on that first piece. I'd say that the Cambridge, they had a sub on board. They are certainly the Cambridge women marginal favourites for me. And I'd say in terms of looking at that, I'd say Oxford are pretty much, let the race happen now. If the race was happening today, I think there wouldn't be much doubt that it'd be the Oxford men that might take that. But the race isn't happening today. The race is going to be happening in month's time on April the 3rd. And so Cambridge have got perhaps more to think about in terms of their preparation.
Yeah, but we're going to be back and we'll see them back again on Sunday, the 20th of March. We've got the Oxford women lining up with a fixture that's TBC, but they will have another fixture. Cambridge women will be going up against Nieuwrauch, the fantastic Dutch rowing club from the
Amsterdam.
Netherlands. Yeah, from Amsterdam. And then we've got the Oxford Men's Blue Boat that will go up against that Oxford Brookes crew that we've just seen. We'll get the measure of that and to sort of quantify how Cambridge's performance today measures up. So do join us again. We will be live streaming some of those fixtures on Sunday, the 20th of March. I've been Camilla Hadland. I've been joined by Martin Cross here, as we have been for this fixture series of the Gemini boat race. And we can't wait to see you again in a few weeks' time. But thank you for tuning in. Thanks to Ludum for putting together all of this production, the footage, the data, everything we see. And thanks to you all for tuning in. And we'll see you next time here at the Gemini Boat Race.
Bye now.